I'm not trying to impress you. I'm just trying to impress upon you. I'm like you. I'm no better than you. And I'm not trying to offend anyone, trying to act all there if you got 940. But literally a 960 SAT guy, I cannot, you've never seen me read a speech because I cannot read a speech. I'm not trying to impress you.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the following program. I am your host, Joe Newman, a.k.a. Good Lawgic. I hope you all had a phenomenal weekend, whether you're dealing with hurricane, blizzard, or something like that, as I was up here, or you're in, I don't know, sunny Southwest and don't know what a shovel looks like. I hope your weekend went very well for you. Mine was actually particularly fantastic. It was actually a uniquely amazing weekend for me. Family, parties, it was all good. Lots of happy occasions, thank God, in the family. Thank you, God. And yeah, and both sides of my family. One from my wife's side, one from my side. And it was all, I guess it's also my wife's side too. Well, anyway, that's neither here nor there. That clip that we open with is actually going to be our opening story today. Gavin Newsom, what do we have going on for you today? Well, Gavin Newsom made a complete jackass out of himself when he was trying to pander to the Black community, and it has blown up in his face in ways that are delicious and frankly something that every Democrat deserves, because all they do ever is pander to the Black community. In fact, they pander to every one of the different communities that they try to cobble together into some sort of voting base, where it's just routine pandering while offering them solutions that are far more damaging than the actual problems that any of these individual communities are facing. So, and it's without exception, every solution they offer just is designed to make it worse. Almost, it cannot be accidental when you're making it worse every single time, while portraying it as like hope, change, care, love, pride, all this other stuff, all these different things that they're continually promising, which invariably are designed to make these different communities dependent on the Democrat Party. But I'm not going to spend a lot of time focusing on that. I am going to be spending some time looking at the reactions to Gavin Newsom's complete and total gaffe and how he just sounded like a complete and total idiot, and all the hate that he is deserving for that. I'm going to be spending some considerable time talking about Trump's tariffs. That ties into our goal for tonight. Tonight's goal, in case you're wondering, saying, hey, Joe, is there a goal tonight? Yes, there is. The goal tonight is that we get 15 or more super chats of $10 or more, and not necessarily super chats. It can be Rumble Rants, Digger Dollars. It could be, you could FedEx me a $10 money order if you know the right people at FedEx and get me here within 2 hours. I say great. Any way you can get it, by hook or by crook. If we get 15 of those within the next 2 hours, I am going to be going through Kavanaugh's dissent that he put forward in the learning resource case, that decision that dropped on Friday. That is the notorious decision that the Supreme Court leveled, trying presumably to destroy tariffs. That seemed to be the goal. It's like, we don't want the tariffs. We're getting rid of the tariffs. And we're telling you to go jump in a lake with your tariffs, Trump. And we're going to see that Trump's reaction was literally the most Trump thing ever. The most Trump thing ever. And kind of amazing. So I'm going to be talking about that decision. I'm also, within the context of that decision, I want to talk with you about this new legal invention that the Supreme Court has created this new legal invention and just how manipulative and evil it actually is. And it's a relatively new invention. I know they can reference back to some comments from O'Connor in 2000, but in the context of the history of American jurisprudence, this is a brand new invention. It's really a brand new invention, which has only been codified, or I shouldn't say codified, that really was referring to a statute. It's been cemented by more and more legal decisions over the last couple of years, and that is the major questions doctrine. So I want to explain to you and walk you through exactly what it is, how it works, and just how evil it is, and how completely outside the scope of traditional American jurisprudence it is. And I'm going to make it in ways that you can understand. That's the goal. I always want to try and make sure, especially if I'm dealing with something that's a complicated area of law, I want to make sure that by the time I'm done here, you all understand it. You all understand exactly what it's about and why I come to the conclusions about a particular case or a legal theory and the logic behind where I'm coming from. And I welcome dissent from you with respect to my opinions on anything related to law, frankly, on anything, but particularly about the law. I welcome your dissent. If you have a differing opinion, please, you could drop a comment down below. Tell me, Joe, you're an idiot. Joe, you're crazy. I think you make a more sound point when you can actually back it up with some sort of logical basis to reach your differing opinion. But I am a big believer in free speech, and if your free speech differs from perspectives that I have, that only enhances and enriches the public discourse. So I certainly welcome that. What else I have for you tonight? Well, we got some stuff on Jack Smith, little bit. I haven't really even looked at it that much because I've just been very, very busy, and so I haven't really looked at it in earnest. But we're going to try and take a peek at that. And I also want to cover the State of the Union, which is going to be tomorrow. I will tell you that tomorrow evening, I will be live streaming the State of the Union. I hope you will join me for that so that we can enjoy that together. And I'm going to close out tonight's show. I think that's the best way to do it, by addressing the State of the Union and some of the interesting, unique reflections of the period of time that we're living in here with respect to the State of the Union, which is scheduled for tomorrow. Anyone have a time on that? What time it's supposed to be? Because I'm going to be live streaming it like live. Like I'm going to be going live when it goes live. So I'm expecting it to be a phenomenal State of the Union. Actually, I think he's going to be telling you all sorts of wonderful things. So yeah, that is tomorrow. Newsom, I'm dumb as F, just like you. Sin's words, yeah. That's pretty much what he says in that clip. He's like, I'm dumb like you. Don't like this is I'm one of. It's his way of trying to say I'm one of you. I thought that clip was great in just like showing how he's like basically wearing blackface. Aaron Troyer, welp, I got no warning at all. You're about to go live. I even missed the intro. No worries though. Take my money. Well, thank you, Aaron. Thank you. How did you not get warning? That doesn't make sense. I've started getting much better about this. Much better about giving notice in advance, where I set the show up hours in advance, and then I'll sort of tweak the thumbnail and the description, but you'll see, like I even referenced what topics I planned on covering tonight when I posted it around 6:37 Eastern time, like 3 hours ago. I posted it. So I told you all it was coming. I mean, I was like 5 minutes late my start time, but we are going to roll on. I thank you so much. So I think it's time for us to roll on. Breck Nichols sending out a 10. We got 2 10s already from the ghetto. Two. So like when you see that there's only 14 left in YouTube land, it's really 12. It's true. Breck Nichols saying, Joe, can you take a post-dated out-of-state third-party check? Are you asking me for purposes of... Are you asking me like a legal question, like someone's offering you one, or are you saying purposes of filling our $10 objective? Because I probably would take it for that. But if someone gave it to me for a payment that I actually really was depending on, I would avoid that. I think it ends up being very bank dependent. I actually roughly 6 months ago, I deposited a fairly significant check, which was, oh, you're saying post dated. So it's post dated. I tell you, post dated, you can't wait. When you say post dated, most people say post dated is they give it to you before the date comes. So I think people do that a lot. I'm not telling you that it's legal. I'm passing on to you that that's what the law says. I'm telling you, I think people do that a lot. I was referring to a check that I had, which was supposed to set to expire in 6 months, and I deposited it 8 months later. It was sort of kicking around, and I just sort of, yeah. So, yeah. Anyway. So that's my answer to you on that question. Uzziah says, Joe, I'm here to ask you the burning question that is currently on the world's mind and what everyone needs to know. Do you want to build a snowman or do you want to build a snowman or a snow castle? Oh my God, I can't even tell you how much effort I put in. And that's to clear my walkway, because I'm not one of these path guys. Okay. I am not a path guy. When I am done shoveling my walk, I want all of the pavement visible. Like, I don't want it's like, no, it's got to be, I want to see a nice wide pavement. And I was telling my son when we were done, I was like, doesn't it look pretty? It looks nice. It looks nice when you actually do like a nice, like the entire pavement clear, the steps completely clear. I want it to be just, but we actually have a snowblower now. And this snowblower, I gotta tell you, it eats through batteries so fast. And we had to like be shoveling in the middle of the snowstorm because it was like so aggressively heavy raining down on us. And I was like, it's not gonna be able to clear through a foot of snow. It needs to like go like 4 inches at a time. And when it actually overnight, we got 6 inches, I was done. I was like, it was useless today. I was doing everything by hand today. With great assistance from my son, who happens to be in town. He's not usually in town, but he's in town this weekend because of all the parties we had. So anyhow, that's but it's tiring. It's like, it feels rewarding. Like, hard work feels rewarding when you're done with it, but it is tiring. I feel like physically tired. Like, it was a lot of snow. I gotta do my whole driveway. It's a lot of snow. But it looks good now. Looks really good. Not yet. Not your fault. YouTube is so ho. How many inches of snow did you get? My daughter and husband are stationed up at West Point. They live in a house at the academy. She had 6-foot drifts. I didn't see drifts quite like that. I would estimate that we had probably about 15 to 18 inches. That's my estimate, like 15 to 18 inches. That's my guess. So, which is the biggest snowstorm we had in a couple of years, in a few years now. We had a lot of snow this winter. That was the biggest storm we've had this year in years. That was pretty big. Anyway, let's get on. Oh, we got this. John Mansell made a video since Google Voice wouldn't let me through. Try my best to express why I don't believe in tariffs. Came away with more respect for your video making skills video on my channel. Okay, I really want to watch this now. I really want to. How long is your video? I really want to. Now I really want to watch this. How long is your video? It's interesting you bring this up, because I'm going to tell you that I actually am working on a video, and I want feedback from you guys. The feedback I want. How long is it? Here he is responding to me. 9 minutes. 9 minutes. Maybe we'll watch it when I'm covering tariffs maybe we'll do this later. I'm not promising. I'll tell you this much. If we hit our goal, I'm watching this video from John. Okay? If we hit the goal tonight, I will watch this video along with doing the Kavanaugh thing. Okay? That's a good deal. It's a 9-minute video. And yeah, I'll even give you a heart about that. Well done. So So while we're talking about making videos, I will tell you this. There's a video idea that I've been working on. I'm going to put this up as a goal before we get in, and then we're going to get right on to get Gavin Newsom. So this is the last little side point that I have here before we do that. Okay. So, he's talking about my video making skills, video editing skills. It's very hard. It's very hard to edit videos if you don't know what you're doing. It really is. I've been getting better at it, but it's very hard. So the question that I'm putting up for you as a poll, okay, and I really don't know what to do with this. I'm working on a video right now. Where I am taking the transcript of Kid Cudi's testimony. I know, very timely. Kid Cudi's testimony at the Diddy trial. And I'm using AI to create all the voices. So it actually sounds like what Kid Cudi sounded like at this thing. And I'm about a third of the way through. I spent like a whole bunch of hours. This is much more challenging than I anticipated it being. And I don't know what to do for the video element to it. The whole sell is really in the audio portion of it, right? I mean, we want to hear the actual words that he's saying and the voices. And I got Brian Steele's voice. So I got that. And I've got the actual judge's voice, which I have cloned his voice. So you get to, it really sounds like what we heard. I couldn't find the assistant U.S. attorney who did the direct. And she has the biggest speaking part of anyone, because she's just asking a lot of questions. And a lot of times the answer is just yes, no, Cassie, Sean Combs, and she'll ask a lengthy question. So she has the biggest speaking part. And when I found the perfect actress whose voice to me sounded the most like Emily Johnson's. So I cloned her voice. So it really sounds really good. Like so far from what I've done, it sounds really good. My question is what video I should have playing while this audio is going. And here are my options. Option 1 is literally nothing, which that's the easiest one to do. Option 2 is to have, how like people have like this just sort of like a wave motion type of thing. That's the next easiest option, which is to just basically have this whole, like whatever psychedelic type of thing. Like if you ever watched what's his face, that music composer guy who I've had on him, it's a friend of mine, but I'm blanking on his name right now, who creates wave music. He does a lot of stuff with he does a lot of stuff where he'll take like a quote of someone and just turn it into music. I know you all know who I'm talking about here. You're saying court sketches. I didn't even think of court sketches. That's really not bad. Court sketches is not a bad idea at all. Court sketches in motion. Okay, that sounds really expensive. That sounds really expensive. Yeah, Akira the Don is the name I was thinking of. So he does like this wave motion type of thing, and I can do that this way as like something visual to look at. Another thought I had was to basically use a still, and whoever is talking, like their still would basically be on the screen. So I would like pop back and forth from being Kid Cudi to this person to that person, whatever. So like that's another way to do it, is to basically have a still. So like this way, it's like that person is talking now. So another thing I was thinking about doing was actually taking like video of like Cassie with Sean Combs, having that be silence, and then having like, just them talking, or Kid Cudi together with Cassie Ventura, or Kid with Sean Combs, and like video like that where you actually hear him talking while the video is playing there. Because I think people like seeing faces. I think we are naturally drawn to seeing people. That's one of the ways that God hardwired us, is that we enjoy seeing people, like whatever. So I think seeing video footage, and let's face it, like, all the people involved here in this story are would be classified by most of the world as being pretty people, even Sean Combs. So I think seeing video clips of them, but I'm just worried that might get me like copyrighted if I do that. So that's why I'm a little bit I'm a little bit hesitant about that. Like, I don't want to get hit with, start dealing with copyright claims over video that's just extraneous to the real juice that I'm offering, which is the court transcript come to life. So I'm not even going to put that one as an option for you, just because I'm afraid you guys will vote for that, and I'm really nervous about the ramifications of that. But that was a thought that I had. So I'm going to start a poll here. What video? What visual should I create for audio recreation of Kid Cudi testimonial? Make a random vid. Maybe I'll use court drawings of each of them. That might be a way to do it. Court drawings from trial, and I'll have doesn't matter. All right. All right, there you go. That's, now we're all set on that. That's up there. I'm going to look in the ghetto real quick if you have thoughts as to what I should be doing. Jody's saying court sketches my vote. Delay is obvious as I vote LSD. Hey, welcome, Raiders. Whiskey Capitalist Podcast has rated the stream. Hey, Whiskey Capitalists. I'm probably going to end up grokking it. Midgie Mom, thank you. Midgie Moon, sorry. God bless you. Thank you so much for the generous tip there. Much obliged to you. Malcolm McKee says, what is the goal milestone to get you finally play Phoenix? $200. I just made that up. I just totally made that up. Let's talk about Gavin Newsom. It's time. So in case you missed it, Gavin Newsom. Well, here's the clip with Zeke Arkham giving his reaction to Gavin Newsom, calling a room full of black folks stupid and then clapping for it. I seriously don't know what to be more embarrassed about. This is him watching the clip, and we'll watch it with him.
Just trying to impress upon you, I'm like you. I'm no better than you. You know, I'm a 960 SAT guy. and I'm
basically implying that there's no such thing as smart black people. I'm just like you.
I'm not trying to offend anyone, trying to act all there if you got 940. But literally a 960 SAT guy. I cannot, you've never seen me read a speech because I cannot read a speech.
In case you missed it, this is Gavin Newsom, the current governor of California, addressing an all-black crowd. And did he just call them all stupid?
He did.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
He was basically saying, we're all stupid together. I'm as stupid as you are.
But he stood up there and said, I'm just like you. I got a 960 on the SATs. I can't read. Did he basically just tell an all-black crowd, hey, I'm like you because I can't get higher than the 1,000 on an SAT, and I have problems reading. Is that
Which back when he was taking the SAT, 1,000 was average. I don't know if that's still average now, but 1,000 was average.
really what he just said to an all-black crowd? And they clapped for that. He could have said a whole list of other things. He could have said, hey, listen, I grew up watching Sanford and Son, loved the show. We all have known he was lying, but he could have said that.
He never heard of Sanford and Son. It was the inspiration for the theme for Seinfeld. Totally made that up.
He could have said, hey, listen, I used to play basketball or whatever, which he's tried to say before on certain other podcasts and interviews and stuff like that. We know he can't do that either, but at least that's better.
I'll tell you right now, I cannot play basketball. I mean, I've tried. And yeah, and I have just such an awkward shot. It's not pretty. I'm an okay rebounder. I mean, I'm talking about, young Joe. I'm not talking about the grizzled veteran of the courts that you see now. I've tried. I have. And I was like, by white boy standards, kind of bad. Not like dreadful, but like in regular sports, in sports that I actually, enjoy playing, I was really good. Not basketball. I can't ball. I don't know. That ball just doesn't bounce right for me or something.
Then saying, I'm like you, I'm not that bright, which is what he just said to an all-black crowd.
Oh, totally what he said.
And they clapped for him.
Let's not get
this wrong. He's definitely running for president. He's doing all these interviews.
He could have said he likes hot sauce. He carries hot sauce in his purse. That would have been funny. That would have been really funny, actually, if he said that. That would have been hilarious if he said he carries hot sauce in his purse. Call back to Hillary. That would be funny.
He's going on all these podcasts and he's doing all these speeches and he's making all these appearances because he wants to run for president. AOC does as well, which is why she had that whole disaster over in Europe. And now she's trying to backtrack because she's getting goofed on over it. We all know they both want to run for president. Gavin Newsom more than anybody else. But he basically just went in front of an all-black crowd and called you all stupid and thinks he did a great job. And he's laughing about it, and so are you. What does that say about you more than anything? Doesn't say anything about me because I'm not the one cheering for him. I'm the one that's seeing through all of this. But the crowd there, basically, they had their own, if you're not going to vote for me, you ain't black.
Yes, I was thinking that. I didn't watch this clip yet, but I was thinking exactly that. This is Joe Biden. If you don't vote for me, you ain't black. That was his Biden moment here.
And they all cheered. Whenever you're ready for these Democrats to stop playing in your face, let me know, because there'll be a welcome change to the black community. A very welcome change. Zeke Arkham, got your 6. Bye.
Well done, Zeke. Here's CJ Pearson giving his take on it.
Less than 1,000 in the SAT that he can. So Gavin Newsom thinks that because he's a dumbass and scored less than 1,000 in the SAT that he can relate to the black experience. That's what he said to a room of black and brown people in the city of Atlanta, Georgia, just this past weekend. And this man said this with a straight face, that because he scored a 960 on the SAT, he was just like me. Well, Gavin, let me tell you something. I didn't score a 960 on the SAT. I scored a lot.
But did it? Did it work out for all, Joe? Did it? We might soon learn otherwise. Seems like we're getting more and more evidence that it really didn't.
Higher than that on the SAT. And by the way, a lack of academic performance or the ability to excel within school doesn't make you black. But what it does do, if you think that that does make you black.
But did he? That's my point. But did he?
is that it makes you a racist, right? So it's so funny to me that the Democrats, while they no longer wear those white hooded robes that the KKK would run around in as they terrorize black people, they still find a way to remind us in ways big and small that they did used to wear those robes. Apparently, Gavin Newsom's heart still wears that robe because he thinks that being a dumbass makes you black. Gavin, you are disgusting in every which way. And this moment from this day will haunt you for a time long to come.
And by the way, when he was talking about, the historic Democrats and their KKK, one of the things that the Democrats are routinely saying is that there was a great switch of parties that happened in the 60s. So Democrats became Republicans, Republicans became Democrats sometime during the civil rights movement. That's one of the things they love to pretend happened, which did not happen. That's all a myth. That did not happen. So they love to say that. And then they love to bask in the fact that FDR is a Democrat. Well, you can't be basking in the fact that FDR is a Democrat before the civil rights movement if you're sitting there saying that there was a great switch happening in the 60s. Right? I mean, because you're basically saying FDR wasn't your party. That's what you're saying. You're saying I wasn't, back in the day before the civil rights movement, I was Republican. But we all switched along. So how are you basking in FDR? How are you doing that if you're actually pretending that switch is real? Now, the switch is not real. If you actually look through the numbers, I saw a video done by Dinesh D'Souza, where he was basically showing that was all myth. And that there was like a total of like 20 members of Congress who switched. So that was all just garbage. But I think it's something to consider next time you hear some Democrat talking about, the greatness of FDR is like, don't you believe in the switch? So if you're basking in the greatness of FDR, then you should be basking in the terribleness of all them slaveholders. Joe, did you see AOC's drinking video of her explaining how snow doesn't melt at 20 degrees? No, I did not see that. Did that really happen? Really? Really? That's funny. That's funny. Nicki Minaj weighing in as well. His way of bonding with black people is tell them how stupid he is and that he can't read. That means my first read on him was correct. He's been handed so many things and put in high positions he's never earned or deserved. Well, there's a great point by Nikki. Then how did you get so far? Oh, you were gifted. You were gifted. You want to know how the craziest part of this footage that will haunt him forever? He literally slowing his speech down and talking in sporadic cadence. He's not just telling them that they're all probably stupid and probably can't read. He's literally slowing down his speech to make them understand the words that are coming out of his mouth as if they're children. That means he really believes they're slow. He's not just saying it. He didn't misspeak. He believes it. You love it? He does love black people? Let's hear him slow down his cadence because I didn't notice that. Let's see what Nicki Minaj has here.
I'm not trying to impress you. I'm just trying to impress upon you. I'm like you. I'm no better than you. I'm a 960 SAT guy. and I'm not trying to offend anyone, trying to act all there if you got 940. But literally a 960 SAT guy. I cannot, you've never seen me.
He is talking slower.
Read a speech.
He is slowing his cadence.
Because I cannot read a speech. Maybe the wrong business to be in. I'm not.
Yeah. That's a great catch by her. I missed it. And she got it. It's a good job. Byron Donald saying Gavin's fake. He's a guy who was bankrolled by San Francisco elite and who drinks Prosecco. I don't even know how to pronounce that. That's how non-elite I am. I don't even know how to pronounce that. Is that Prosecco? Prosecco? One of you is going to know. I'm not asking Google to tell me. But he's drinking at the French Laundry while he shut down California during COVID. Worst governor in the country. I believe at the 960, though. It's clear he's not that bright. This is why California leads a nation and Americans leaving. Donald Trump Jr. weighing in. I honestly thought this had to be a deep fake or something because it's so insane and racist beyond belief. But just like we saw with the French Laundry, Gavin really is a cartoon villain of the white liberal elitism. This and much more tonight at 6 p.m. Well, I missed it. But... Oh, and let's get Scott Jennings before I get that. Gavin Newsom, this is Scott Jennings weighing in on Gavin Newsom.
California Governor Gavin Newsom, furiously trying out new characters as he runs for president in 2028, was speaking to a crowd of black voters in Georgia. So we have a rich white guy here, a career politician, speaking to a crowd of black voters in the South. You have to listen to how Gavin Newsom chose to attempt to bond with this audience. Here's cut 2.
I'm just trying to impress upon you. I'm like you. I'm no better than you. You know, I'm a 960 SAT guy. and, you know, and I'm not trying to offend anyone, you know, trying to act all there if you got 940. But literally a 960 SAT guy. I cannot, you've never seen me read a speech because I cannot read a speech. Maybe the wrong business to be in.
Folks, this is about the most racist thing you could possibly say. Gavin Newsom telling a group of black voters in a slow, condescending voice, speaking to them like they're children. Hey, I am as dumb as you are. Please like me. Now, if this were a Republican, the news media would be calling it the end of their career.
It's true. They would. That's totally true. They would be screaming about how racist this was. Imagine Trump had done this. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. They would be going nuts.
But for a Democrat telling black voters, hey, I know you're dumb, so let me pretend to be as dumb as you are. Newsom, by the way, is claiming he was simply referring to his dyslexia. Folks, prepare yourself. Newsom's dyslexia is going to be the new Biden stutter. When the person says something dumb or racist, just blame it on that. It's the Biden playbook all over again.
Yep. Maybe he was dyslexic and he really got a 690. I don't know. It could be. Could be. I don't know. No way to know. Gavin is an alumnus of Santa Clara U. It's not Claria, right? It's Santa Clara. Average SAT score of students in 2026 was 1412. Did he buy his way in? Oh, this is a good question. This is a really good question. I don't feel no ways tired. They all pander. They all pander. They all pander. Let me just double check, make sure if I move on that I didn't miss anything over in the ghetto. Let me check. I'm going to check my. It's time for me to check on my my poll. Court drawings from trial is pretty much in the lead here. That's pretty much in the lead. Definitely doing well. It's definitely doing well so far. As is our goal. I know it says 7 out of 15, but we got 2 more from Rumble, so it's really 9 out of 15. We're only 40 minutes in. We're doing well. Doing very, very well. This is strange. I just noticed that my StreamYard numbers are not properly reflecting my viewers. And that's really weird. I think it's been doing this for a while. Because I got like 500 of you watching in YouTube. And on Rumble, I have 140 of you. And that's 640. And it's telling me I got 530. That's very, and that doesn't even count. That doesn't even count X or whatchamacallit. That's very strange. I don't know why it's doing that. Newsom can win over the black vote if he comes out as a jive turkey. People don't say jive turkey enough anymore. We need to bring back jive turkey. Jive turkey is a term that we need a lot more of. That's straight from Sanford and Sons. You jive turkey? I miss jive turkey. Oh, I don't even know what jive means. I have no idea. I think jive does that mean dancing? I know it's always followed by turkey, but well, I don't know. Out of sight. That's right. Out of sight. Let's bring back the 70s. All right. Let's start talking a little bit about the State of the Union. Tomorrow, I will be covering the State of the Union live. I'm going to be live streaming it. What time is the State of the Union starting, Joe? Let's ask Grok. Grok, what time is the State of the Union address starting tomorrow?
Let me check that for you real quick.
Thank you.
Checking the schedule right now. It's tomorrow, Tuesday, February 24th, and President Trump's State of the Union kicks off at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Most networks start pre-coverage around 7, so tune in early if you want the build-up.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be doing the pregame thing. I might start a little early. I might start like at 8:30. It's possible. It's possible. It's possible. Oh, yeah, that's right. From Airplane, I speak jive. So why would they be calling him a jive turkey? POTUS Truth an hour ago that. Wow, Newsom has dropped out of the presidential race. Not sure of his source, but there it is. Wow. Here we go. I knew someone would explain it to me. Jive, reference to jazz, and also uses slang as a taunt or a sneer. All right. Yeah. All right. There you go. All right. Well, let's hear Maria Bartiromo telling us about the State of the Union. So I definitely will be live at 9 o'clock. Questions whether I start at 8:30 or 8:45 or 9. It's going to be one of those 3 start times. Let's hear from Maria.
It's incredible to me that it appears to be that the Democrats are so angry about President Trump's success. He's been so successful on so many levels and has done things so fast that now the Democrats are boycotting, some of them are boycotting the State of the Union. Adam Schiff, Mr. Russia collusion himself, said he's not going to show up to the State of the Union tomorrow night, Congressman. We'll be watching that one. Good to see you, sir. Thank you. Congressman Buddy Carter this morning in Georgia. We'll be right back. Stay with us. It's incredible.
So she's reporting on Adam Schiff saying he's boycotting. I'm boycotting the State of the Union. Boycotting. Here he is making his stupid statement.
Donald Trump is violating the law and Constitution.
You don't know anything about the law or Constitution.
He's ignoring court orders. He is weaponized.
He hasn't ignored any court orders.
The Justice Department to go after his enemies. He
Actually, not sufficiently. He needs to be doing it a lot more.
is letting loose ICE troops in our streets that are getting people killed.
They're not getting people killed. You're sicking people on them and then they get killed. The only reason any of them are dead is because of you and your ilk.
I will not be attending the State of the Union. I've never.
You shouldn't be there. You should not be there. It's good that he can chase you out of your own house. I like that. I like that he can chase you off. Adios. Bye. Bye. Please stay away from little boys.
Missed one. I have always gone both to inaugurations and to States of the
But I'm a whiny little bitch, and I'm really, really mad now.
Union. But we cannot treat this as normal.
No one should ever treat you as normal. There's nothing remotely normal about you.
This is not business as usual. I will not give him the audience he craves for the lies that he tells.
I don't think he craves your audience. I think somehow he'll get over. My gut is he's going to get over you being absent. Frankly, I think he'd be fine with every Democrat being absent. I don't think he's worrying about it. I don't think so. I think he's okay.
I'll be outside the Capitol with Midas touch and move on for the People's State of the Union.
The People's State of the Union. Oh. What the hell does that even mean? Oh, it's the People's State of the Union.
8 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday. Donald Trump.
Hey, he's starting at 8 p.m. over there, Midas touch. Midas touch, the looniest of the loons. Bringing on one of the looniest of the senators. You think Adam Schiff is the looniest senator? He's not the dumbest one. That's Hirono. He's not. I'm expecting him to be talking about how amazing America has been in the first year under his. I think Maria Bartiromo was correct. He has done a phenomenal job in most respects. In most respects, I'm curious whether or not he's going to bring up the Epstein files. I don't know if he will or not. He might bypass it entirely. But no, he's been body slamming the entire world, including Canada. This comes courtesy of my good friend Audio Joe. So there, as we had, in case you missed it over the weekend, another miracle on ice. Instead of being the Russians this time, we beat our arch nemesis Canada, beating our arch nemesis Canada, where USA has taken hockey gold, both men and women's. Both of them being overtime 2-1 victories by the phenomenal success of our Olympic hockey teams. So I want to express my congratulations to them. What a phenomenal run. Oh my God. USA. It's like only under Trump. Only under Trump could that happen, right? That wouldn't happen with anyone else. I don't think that would happen with anyone else. So, Dr. Dawn Michael saying, seeing the Liberals absolutely lose it over FBI Director Kash Patel's epic locker room bash with Team USA's men's hockey squad after clinching that historic gold medal, utterly priceless. Under Trump, we have Kash drinking with U.S. hockey win. Under Biden, that's where the drinking happens. The stupid, I don't know, Dylan, whatever the dude's name was. I think it's a great contrast there, right? Seems strange that was 4 years ago. I think it was 4 years now, nearly. Yeah, so there you go. Kash Patel drinking with USA. That's great. And the reason I'm bringing him up at this story up at this moment is that the men's hockey team has agreed to help fill in Adam Schiff's seat at the State of the Union tomorrow. The men's U.S. hockey team has accepted President Trump's invitation to come to the State of the Union address tomorrow, per Speaker Johnson. The team was ecstatic to get the invite from Trump by phone. Couldn't contrast this with our NFL Super Bowl winners who said Seattle Seahawks, who like completely woke gay tards, basically saying we don't want to go to the White House because Trump. We don't like Trump. But Yeah, our USA hockey team, Miracle on Ice, like the real champions, they're excited. They're ecstatic to come to the State of the Union. I mean, seriously, they're ecstatic about coming to an hour-long speech. Also, on a military plane, Trump said, the nice part about being president is that you don't have to worry about the weather or landing. The best pilots, they're the best pilots. They're the best pilots, absolutely the best. It doesn't matter if it's snowing or the worst blizzard. You'll be sailing through that sucker like you did on the ice. So let's hear from him. Let's hear from Trump on the phone with Team USA.
I just told you people 2 minutes ago, I didn't know they'd be calling. I said, we're giving the State of the Union speech on Tuesday night. I could send a military plane or something, but if you would like to, it's the coolest night, it's the biggest. We're in. Yeah.
Can you pick us up in Miami on Tuesday morning?
Yeah, Tuesday morning. We'll get cash and we'll get the military to get you guys over.
Okay, let's go.
Boys
are going to the State of the Union.
The nice thing about being president is I can tell you, you don't have to worry about the weather or landing. We don't care if it's snowing, if it's the worst blizzard, you'll be sailing through that sucker just like you did on the ice.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Now, we'll do it at the White House anytime. What would really be cool, and we'll do the White House the next day, we'll just have some fun. We have medals for you guys. And we have to, I must tell you, we're going to have to bring the women's team. You do know that. I do believe I probably would be impeached, okay? But anyway, if you could work that out, I would be honored to have you. I'll introduce you to the whole.
I got it, boss. I got it.
Okay, you got it, Cash.
I'm on it.
Cash is doing it. I'm happy.
I'm fucking on it.
Congratulations. That was an unbelievable game. I don't know if one person that wasn't, everybody that called me said, I'm watching the hockey game. You know? I don't know of anybody that wasn't. And you're going to be proud of that game for 50 years as you grow older. I mean, it was amazing. So we love you guys. Congratulations. And I hope to see you, Cash, Tuesday night. And I want to shake hands. I'm going to shake hands with everybody. But I got to shake hands with that goalie.
Tuesday night. We'll see you Tuesday night, Mr. President.
See you Tuesday night.
I'm driving the bus, boss. We're bringing the whole bus.
So that was a cool moment for them. I didn't know. I didn't see that. Thank you for sharing that, Uzeli. The women's team said no. Why? Because they're affluent, female, white liberals. That's right. Affluent, white, female liberals. Yeah, there you go. There you go. That's the difference right there. So that's something to look forward to at the State of the Union that we will be watching tomorrow evening right here on this channel live, which is supposed to be starting. The State of the Union is kicking off at 9 p.m. tomorrow. So that is something that we have to look forward to. And I'm very much looking forward to watching that with you tomorrow. So that'll be cool. So there you go. There you go. All right. Should we cover Jack Smith real quick? We should cover Jack Smith real quick. We should. Let me just cover some of these chats that came in first. Peaceful constitutional standing military legal justice system rescue of innocence is the long name of what I can't say in super chat. What? Peaceful constitutional standing military legal justice system rescue of innocence is the long name of what I can't say in super chat. I don't even. One of you has to understand what this means. What's he saying? I think you could probably say non super chat. Any of you? Exile. Tell me what you're not in super chat. Send it in there. Because I'm peaceful constitutional standing. Is this 2A? Rescue of innocents. I'm so lost. I'm so lost. I don't know what's happening. I don't know what's happening. All right. Well, is it me or have woke medal winners been missing the Olympics? Lots of classy pride in the country, and I'm here for it. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, although I guess that the women hockey must be kind of woke if they're turning down an invitation to see the president. You got to be pretty woke for that. That's a level of dedication to the cause. Cash Patel is going to drive the bus. Perfect. Nice. Brian Oldenkamp coming in here being like, no, dude, we're hitting this goal tonight. We are totally hitting this goal as it's not one, not two, but three super chats of $10 as he's trying to push us towards our goal. Push us towards the goal. Well done, brother. Thank you very much. Thank you kindly. I think he wants to watch John Mansell's video. I think that's what it is. I think he wants to have us watching that. So I have a feeling we're going to hit the goal tonight. It's feeling like we're going to hit the goal. I have his video all queued up here. Ready to go? Ready to go? Felzu sniping the goal from Brian. Nicely done. Nicely done indeed. So let's see. Let's see. It's showing me 12 here, which puts me at 14. Because there were two from Rumble. So it's showing me so I can't scream it yet. I can't scream it yet, but I'm positive I'm positive we're gonna end up hitting that goal tonight. All right. So apparently Jack Smith, you might remember him. He was the wannabe prosecutor who was going after Trump in 2 different jurisdictions, and in one of them he was in Florida. And in Florida, the judge correctly recognized that he was not a properly appointed special counsel, which meant that he had zero authority to bring any cases against anyone, including President Trump, and she dismissed his case, Judge Eileen Cannon. Based, and when I say based, I don't mean because she supported Trump. I'm saying because she's actually following the Constitution. So God bless her for that. And now, and then a new case came up before her, which basically involved Jack Schiff, and he wanted to release the his special counsel report. And Judge Eileen Cannon says that's not going to happen. Judge Eileen Cannon permanently blocked the release of special counsel Jack Smith's report on the Trump classified documents case. He wants the public to, he wants to make his case in the court of public opinion in order to try and damage Trump, because that's pretty much all the left knows how to do, is let's try and spill hate and vile, and because they're the party of hate. That's what they are. They're just the party of hate and anger and bitterness. So the party of hate Democrats, one of their champions being Jack Smith, wants to spread more hate, and that's why he wants to release it. But Judge Eileen Cannon says, no, that is not happening. Here are the key elements of the ruling. She says releasing it would risk irreparable harm to the defendant's presumption of innocence, which it definitely would, because people read his accusations in his reports, and they basically come to a conclusion that what he's saying is true, even though there's no way to know that they're true. Volume 2 was prepared after the case dismissal, using materials obtained through the criminal case's discovery without seeking a stay of the dismissal order, making its creation, any external release, unlawful and a violation of the dismissal. So he kept going forward. The audacity of this guy. He never got a stay on the dismissal, and he kept going forward using various weapons at the disposal of special counsel to try and engage in discovery. So he kept going forward with discovery at a point in time where he had no basis to declare himself as special counsel and a right to be engaging in any of this discovery. So this donkeys behind basically was, flouting his lack of authority and he was acting under a fake air of authority. He's pretending he's got the authority to be demanding and subpoenaing documents and other evidence from third parties when he didn't have that authority. And it was adjudicated by a judge to not have that authority. Now, he could have gone to the court and said, hey, while this is under appeal, kindly permit me to continue acting as special counsel, which that flatly would have been denied because the whole case was dismissed because he wasn't special counsel. But he never got that approval from the court, which means he had zero authority. So he's fleshing out his report by obtaining evidence that he's not supposed to be able to obtain and by breaking the rules. Excuse me. Volume 2 contains protected discovery materials under the court's June 2023 Rule 16 protective order, which bars public disclosure without consent or court approval. This includes interview transcripts, search warrant info, grand jury subpoena records, and potentially Rule 6E grand jury material or attorney-client privilege information. So, this was Trump's unopposed motion to stop him from releasing it. So there you go. There you go. Let's see something. Dag nabbit Joe, take my ramen money. Fells is saying, don't spend it on lab meat. I missed your last super chat. I did. They're going to have people in inflatable frog suits at the People's State of the Union. Thought they said Pepe was racist. They can't make up their minds. They can never make up their minds. I don't understand the whole Democrats and frog thing anyway. Other than that, I guess they're a plague on society. I guess that's the whole frog thing. That's my best guess, is that they're a natural plague on society, or an unnatural plague on society. So that is pretty funny. I apologize for missing that. But I apologize for missing your last super chat, Kimmy. But between one of these two, I don't know, because they came in like a minute apart. What I can tell you is this. Go! Well done, ladies and gentlemen. Well done indeed. We have hit our goal for tonight. What that means is that I am going to be going through Kavanaugh's dissent in the case that we're about to start discussing. I am going to be going through that dissent in its entirety, and we're also going to be watching a video made by one of you, specifically John Mansell, where he's refuting my take on tariffs and giving me his position. If you were not here last week when I was talking about tariffs, I think it was on Wednesday night when I had Sin here, and I was explaining the basis for why tariffs, as used by Trump, were a very positive thing. John Mansell disagreed with me, and I felt bad for him because, like, he's sending in super chats, and I would respond to something he would say, and I wasn't looking to have him burn through, tons of money to try and make his point. So I offered him to call in. In lieu thereof, because he did not call in that night, but I basically said, you tell me your number and I'll, ring me up and I'll call you back. You tell me your last 4 digits, and that way I'll be able to just call in because I opened up my phone thing. It's specifically made for him. But in lieu thereof, he's made a video where he has been where he's explaining the basis of his disagreement with me, where I say that tariffs can be a good thing. And I certainly appreciate and enjoy the way Trump has used tariffs, and that it has been a very good thing, a very good weapon at his disposal. And that he's been using it very effectively to engage in foreign affairs. And anyhow, so he put together a 9-minute video disagreeing with me. I'm going to open that up at some point soon. But I do want to get into other stuff about the decision first. We have a general idea as to what's been going on. So the Supreme Court came out with a decision on Friday. This was from Friday. Supreme Court ruled on Friday, let's do it this way, that President Trump exceeded his authority when he imposed sweeping tariffs on imports from nearly every U.S. trading partner, a major setback for his administration's second-term agenda, you might think. The court's 6-3 decision has significant implications for the U.S. economy, potentially, consumers, and the president's trade policy. The Trump administration has said that a loss of the Supreme Court could force the government to unwind trade deals with other countries and potentially pay hefty refunds to importers. Mr. Trump is the first president to claim that 1970s emergency statute, which does not mention the word tariffs, allowed him to unilaterally impose duties without congressional approval. But to be fair, it was replacing a statute which had been used many times to impose tariffs. So that's a little bit of negligent framing by the New York Times. Surprise, surprise. Writing for the majority, Chief Justice John Roberts said that statute does not authorize the president to impose tariffs. President asserts the extraordinary power to unilaterally impose tariffs of unlimited amount, duration, and scope. In light of the breadth, history, and constitutional context of that asserted authority, he must identify clear congressional authorization to exercise it. Why? Why would that be? Why would it have to be clear? That's the question. Justices Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, and Brett Kavanaugh dissented. The decision on Friday left uncertain the extent to which those who pay tariffs might be able to obtain refunds, with Justice Kavanaugh warning that any refund process could be a substantial mess. The United States may be required to refund billions of dollars to importers who pay the tariffs, he wrote, even though some importers may have already passed on costs to consumers or others likely have. So why are they getting the money? Why would they get the money? I don't think they're going to get their refund, but who knows? Some woke judge somewhere might authorize it just to be a pain in the ass to Trump. So, court's ruling backed by justices from across the ideological spectrum, not really, as I'll point out to you, was a rare and significant example of the Supreme Court pushing back on Mr. Trump's agenda. Since he returned to the White House, the court's conservative majority had overwhelmingly issued emergency orders allowing the president to carry his policies on a temporary basis. No, there had been a ridiculous number of emergency TROs levied against him that the court said, you're out of your freaking mind. And basically our district court system is bonkers. That's essentially what they've been saying for the last year. Decision on Friday, this author thinks will have a more lasting impact. But will it? Are you sure about that, Anne? Are you really sure about that, Anne Marimo? Are you really sure? You confident in that? It's an interesting thought. Could be. Here's how Trump reacted to the news of this decision.
In actuality, while I am sure that they did not mean to do so, this
is him talking about the decision.
Supreme Court's decision today made a president's ability to both regulate trade and impose tariffs more powerful and more crystal clear rather than less. I don't think they meant that. I'm sure they didn't. It's terrible. And to think that the Democrats who oppose this only because they want to go the opposite way, They'd like to pack the court. They want to put on 21 people. They want to pack the court, pack the Supreme Court. Maybe they should do it. Maybe they would be better off if they did it. They want to pack the court. They want to do anything to hurt our country. There will no longer be any doubt, and the income coming in and the protection of our companies and country will actually increase because of this decision. I don't think the court meant that, but there it is. Based on long-standing law and hundreds of victories, and even, as I was pointed out before, even thousands of victories over the years. To the contrary, the Supreme Court did not overrule tariffs. They merely overruled a particular use of IEEPA tariffs. And essentially, it's the use to get a fee. I can do anything I want with IEEPA, anything. I just can't charge anybody for it. I can license, I just can't charge them. It's ridiculous, but it's okay because we have other ways, numerous other ways.
I can
The
license?
ability to block.
What does that mean? I can license. I can license. So I'm not charging a tariff. I'm going to charge you a license fee. Okay.
Embargo, restrict, license, or impose any other condition.
So here's the tip off as to like, I think this word license is the key as to like what he plans on doing. That perhaps that for serving as a port of entry or bringing goods in here, he's talking about licensing the rights to bring stuff in here. So I'm not charging a tariff. I'm just licensing you our ports. Proving that in politics, there's always another way to skin that cat. There is always another way to skin that cat. I'll respect you, Supreme Court. I won't use IEEPA to tariff anyone. There's more ways. There's a lot more ways. I got a lot more arrows in that quiver. A lot more arrows.
On a foreign country's ability to conduct trade with the United States under IEEPA has been fully confirmed by this decision. So now,
wait, one more time.
On a foreign country's ability to conduct because we have other ways, numerous other ways. The ability to block, embargo, restrict, license, or impose any other condition on a foreign country's ability to conduct trade with the United States under IEEPA has been fully confirmed by this decision. So now there's no doubt, because, you know, there were a lot of questions about tariffs because no president was smart enough to use them to protect our country from those countries.
No president was smart enough to use them. There are a lot of questions about that, but they basically cemented that I'm allowed to use it to license, embargo, and do lots of things. I can do lots and lots of things. So you thought you were taking away my only weapon here? That's what Trump's saying here. You thought you were taking away my only weapon? No. No. There's the tariffs, or what people, think of tariffs being, that whole thing, that's going to continue. I'm not going to call it tariffs. They're not going to be called tariffs under IEEPA. They're not going to be that. But if you think you're going to be doing business with us for free, no. You just don't understand how DC works. You don't understand how any of this works. That's not how any of this works. So, and here's the thing. Here's the thing. He can basically ride out his entire administration, coming up with one new method after another, and then, say, go work your way up the chain. Go work your way up the chain. How is he supposed to regulate trade with no tariffs? That's a good question. That's a good question. I'm on your side here. You're preaching to the choir with me. I don't know. I think it's pretty stupid. Everything about this is ridiculous. Cecil says he's ready to stream. Wespro. What do you got for me here? Wespro send me a link. Let's see what he sent me here.
of this situation, Your Honor. I am committed to this process.
He's showing. I assume this is in response to my question about creation of my video.
I am committed to the. I understand the gravity of this situation, Your Honor. I am committed to this process and respect the court. I understand the gravity of this situation, Your Honor. I am committed to this process and respect the court. I understand.
You want me to do 6 seconds at a time in AI? That's what you're suggesting I do? 6 seconds at a time? Were they going to do a different AI thing every time? It's an interesting idea. It's an interesting idea. Let's see something. Let's see. This is gonna, look at this little slow ticker here. I don't know. I appreciate your perspective here. I appreciate your suggestion. Uzelian saying, good news, Joe. There'll be less retard moments during this year's State of the Union. Let's see if he's sharing me a link.
Your Honor, I'm here to tell the truth about what I saw.
They're giving me a kid cut. They're giving me. Okay. Maybe if I start from scratch. I don't know. Grok is a little bit of a mess. So Uzelian sharing this here with me with respect to the State of the Union. Let me just cover this real quick because I want to get in on this thing. Massive list of congressional Democrats launch a boycott of President Trump's State of the Union, including Pramila Jayapal and Adam Schiff. Good riddance.
President Trump can do, because this is 100%, and that's exactly what President Trump can do, because this is the message that Republicans are going to take out to the midterms. The notes in which he echoes tonight will be exactly what you hear Republicans say on the stump. And you keep in mind, this is a president that's going to be out there is almost as if he was running for election. They're going to have him on the campaign trail. I'm expecting the president to deliver in a way in which the American people expect him to, presidentially, and tell them what's in it for them. What has he done over the course of a year? And I can tell you, he's accomplished a great deal cleaning up the mess of Joe Biden's presidency, but there's much more to be done. No, 100%.
That's why they don't want to be there. They don't want to hear the applause for all the stuff that he did, that he's accomplished. And there will be massive amounts of applause. That's why they don't want to be there. That's why. And one of them is going to be all the economic success he's had through tariffs, the billions of dollars that have been raised, the hundreds of billions of dollars that have been raised, as well as the new trade deals that he was able to negotiate as a result of these tariffs. And that's why he's not going to go quietly and just ignore the opportunity to use tariffs. And he'll find something similar, just not labeled IEEPA tariffs, in order to go forward with those tariffs. So if they think that they're going to, that they won this now, which is clearly what they think, they're kind of out of their minds. I want to now, as we're talking about the tariffs, though, I'm talking about the decision. I'm going to tell you that the 6 justices were the 3 liberal justices, as well as Gorsuch, Comey, Barrett, and Chief Justice Roberts. The dissent came in from Kavanaugh was written by Kavanaugh. There was a concurring dissent from Thomas and Alito as well. Here's the key thing. I have often described the Supreme Court as really having three different branches. And frankly, I like to think of it as being 3-3-3, but it's really more 3-2-4. You have your three liberals, you have your two conservatives. Three liberals being Kagan, Sotomayor, and Brown Jackson. Those are your three liberals. Your conservatives are Thomas and Alito. And then you have the three new kids with Chief Justice Roberts being the other four, who have their inclinations toward institutionalized establishment, keeping the establishment strong. Basically what you would consider traditional conservatism, but it's not conservatism that's actually designed to, with foundational values. It's just conservatism with a small c, which means conserving our institutions. See, big C conservatism is that, basically that we're going to maintain our values. When I say small c conservatism, little c conservatism, what I mean is they're trying to just preserve not our values, but our institutions. So however things have been done, they want them to continue being done that way. In order to help preserve things as they've been done and acting under that guise, the Roberts Court has invented a brand new legal concept which did not exist in the 20th century. It is a 21st century invention, and that is the major questions doctrine. The major questions doctrine. What is the major questions doctrine? I'm actually going to watch a 3-minute video with you, which I think does a fairly good job of breaking it down. It's 3.5 minutes. It's brought by the Federalist Society. So I'm not going to agree with everything they're going to say here, but it gives a pretty good overview here, and I'll break down for you the parts that I don't remember there being too much that I disagreed with in this video, just as far as breaking down what the law is with the notion of the major questions doctrine.
When courts review issues of administrative law, they should start with the assumption that federal agencies do not have the power to make rules that have politically or economically significant implications.
I don't know if I missed the first 2 seconds of this.
The major question doctrine says that when courts review issues of administrative law, they should...
When they're reviewing issues of administrative law, which tariffs you wouldn't think are part of administrative law. Administrative law is like, what OSHA is doing, what the CDC is doing, what the IRS is doing, different executive agencies. That's different from the president.
Start with the assumption that federal agencies do not have the power to make rules that have politically or economically significant implications.
Why? And what makes something significant? Significant is such a term of art. What's significant to some people is not significant to others. And it also it's largely guesswork.
Unless they've been given clear congressional authorization.
Notice how the focus here is how this is on administrative law, because the way it's been used. And just to tell you how new this thing is, the first decisions to really start talking about the major questions doctrine came out during the Biden administration, 2022. Like, this is like a brand new thing. We've had American jurisprudence for 250 years, but like now we have this brand new concept of the major questions doctrine. The music here makes you want to basically, slit your wrists. So don't do that, because that would be bad. I'm strongly advising against anyone ever doing that, even when listening to piano music. But
last several years, several COVID-19 policies have resulted in lawsuits raising important questions about agency power. And in a recent series of cases, the Supreme Court has used the major questions doctrine to rein in the power of executive agencies. For example, the court blocked OSHA's attempt to impose a COVID-19 test or vaccine mandate on large employers. And it also vacated the stay of an injunction on the CDC's COVID-19 nationwide eviction moratorium. In both cases, the court reviewed the agency's authorizing statute and determined that they did not allow regulation on matters of great economic and political significance.
So they're saying that when you're relying on this statute, the major questions doctrine is this. When you're relying on this statute, if a statute could be read to give you authority X, but it doesn't have to be read that way. And X is something that is a major political or economic question. We're going to assume you do not have that power. I'm going to say this one more time. So if it's a major question, it has, what do they mean by major question? It has that this issue that you're dealing with, and it's really dealing with administrative agencies, not the president himself, which is part of why this is a bastardization of their own stupid new concept. But the idea is we don't want administrative agencies to start going rogue on us and start doing things that Congress never authorized. All the power that administrative agencies have comes from the fact that they were created by Congress. Well, if Congress opened a door that could be read one way, but doesn't have to, it's not expressly written that that's a power that this agency has, and it's a significant power that they are wielding, we are going to assume they do not have that power. That's essentially it. That's essentially what the major questions doctrine is. Here's why it's relevant as to the constitution of the courts. Again, small c with constitution there, meaning the makeup of the courts. Because on the court, you have your three liberal justices. They are going to side with Biden and against Trump every single friggin' time. Every time. The only time that we saw an exception to that was on the 14th Amendment attempt to knock Trump out. That's the only time we saw an exception to that. But they're going to side with Biden against Trump every single time. We know it. You're walking into it. I mean, the 14th Amendment case was so bad that I even predicted that some of them were going to jump ship and join over with the majority in knocking out the 14th, because it was just such a freaking cockamamie theory of law. But we know they're going to decide with Biden against Trump every single time. And when you have the conservative side of Alito and Thomas, it's a very safe bet. They're going to end up siding with Trump and against Biden a lot. That's just being real with you. That's just reality. Now, the other four of them are also tend to be more predictable than people expect. And those four end up deciding every single case when it has a political context. The reason they decide every single case is because it's 3-2. So those four are going to be deciding every single stinking case. And basically, you need 3 out of those 4 to be siding with Alito and Thomas if Trump is going to win. Now, usually you'll end up getting Gorsuch on their side. He's someone who doesn't really feel as much like an institutionalist, the way Amy Coney Barrett does, the way Roberts does, that they are always siding with conserving things as they've been done, even if they've been done in a very corrupt way. And this is the problem with the notion of the extremist notion of an Amy Coney Barrett or a Roberts. This is the problem with them, is in that they will maintain corruption because, well, that's the way it's been done. And this major questions doctrine, this new theory of law that they invented, is a psychedelic dream of an institutionalist. It's the perfect psychedelic dream of an institutionalist, because what it basically says is we, the Supreme Court, have the authority to basically decide something is too significant for you to do anything about it. And since it's not expressed that you have this authority, we're going to knock it out. So if you want to conserve institutions as they are, the concept of a major questions doctrine is your perfect alibi. It's your perfect cover. It is the perfect weapon for you to pull out anytime you want and just say, well, this is a major question. This qualifies as a major question. You can always whip it out because it's such a subjective term. What makes something significant? And we're seeing now that it's not just in cases of administrative agencies that it's like, oh, what's OSHA doing with their vax mandates? No. That all of a sudden now they're starting to go through the whole economic concept as far as like the impact this is having. Who's in a major question? Who's impacted by this in a significant way? How can you prove that this person is in a negative way, that it's harming them negatively? Also, now the court is supposed to sit here like an economist to start figuring out what's going to happen in the future economically. Our best economists don't know what's going to be 2 days from now with our economy. You can find the best economists in the world. They do not know what the economy will look like, if it's going to be surging or, God forbid, we're in the depression 3 weeks from now. But here you have the Supreme Court coming in here and saying, oh, we know that this is economically significant. We know. I'm not saying that tariffs don't have economic significance. They do. What I'm saying, but I want to be crystal clear here. But as far as who it's harming significantly, which American it's allegedly harming significantly, that is something that all of a sudden now they have to sit here and start weighing in on and start figuring out the impact this is going to have on the economy. Like, who pays the tariff? Who pays the tariff at the end of the day? Is it the importer? Is it the person they end up collecting the money from? Is it the exporter, the foreign country that's exporting it to us? Is it the country? Is it something that's being swallowed up by a manufacturer in Indonesia? And it varies so significantly. And the point that I'm getting at here is that there's no definitive way for a court. And what are the positive impacts of it? What about the positive impacts to the American worker? What about the positive impacts to our Treasury Department? What about what about the development of industry domestically? All of these things are things that no Supreme Court should be sitting there weighing in on and sitting there trying to compute, is this something that's a major economic thing? And I understand that Trump is talking about that this is ultimately going to help the Treasury to trillions of dollars. But when you're talking about a major question, the point that I'm getting at here is that even if you're talking about something that's trillions of dollars, what they're supposed to be remedying is a major question is not the benefit to A, but the harm to B. And there's no way you can quantify the harm to B. So in that sense, because that's what would make it a major question. So if you cannot quantify that, and you don't even know that it's necessarily a harm to B, when after all the computations are completed. So in what sense, what gives the Supreme Court the right to all of a sudden say this is something that we have a reason to weigh in? This is a power grab by the Supreme Court. That's what the major questions doctrine ultimately is. It's a power grab that they basically say we can insert ourselves wherever we damn well please, if we think that we are going to be preserving something that we like or stopping an agency, or in this case, a president, from doing something we dislike. Under this new invented theory of a major questions doctrine, this is probably the Supreme Court's most significant power grab since Marbury v. Madison. That's what the major questions doctrine is, because they're basically saying we decide public policy now. And we can just say, hey, this is something that unless you have something expressed from Congress that says that you're able to do this, which, you know, if there was something expressed, it wouldn't be getting to the Supreme Court. that whenever there's an issue about a conflict in politics, whenever there's some sort of issue that we ultimately get to decide, because we're going to label it a major question if we don't like it, and say it's not expressed in there, it's a major question, you lose. Or we'll say it's not a major question if we do like what the new policy is. And we'll say it's not a major question, in which case, oh, you're perfect right to do it. It's a fair reading. We're not able to read into it. It's such a cop-out. That's why I'm saying is this is the ultimate power grab. This is a bigger power grab the Supreme Court is making now than it's made in 200 years. That's how significant a deal this new theory of the major questions doctrine is that was instituted under this Roberts Court. It's a complete and total power grab. Ticks me off. Ticks me off. And the unitary executive theory, yes. What I'm saying is this is actions taken by him individually, right? Like if he's saying like he's passing tariffs or an EO or something of that nature, they could start striking down his EOs, saying, oh, this is a major question. Problem is Congress stopped writing laws. They can't write laws anymore. They cannot write laws anymore because you have a party which is basically, unless you get 60 senators, you're never going to be able to write a law, or you get rid of the filibuster. Problem is Congress stopped writing laws. They created the APA and allow agencies to write their own laws. The APA should be found unconstitutional. Well, under the Chevron doctrine, I think that administrative laws should require congressional votes. All right. We have a very, very lengthy dissent to go through, and we haven't even started. It's a very long dissent. But I promised I was going through it, and we are. So now you understand why I have a problem with the major questions doctrine. You understand what it is, why I dislike it. And we're going to go in and start looking at Kavanaugh's dissent now. Okay. Justice Kavanaugh, with whom Thomas and Alito joined dissenting, acting pursuant to his statutory authority to regulate importation under the 1977 International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEPA. The president imposed tariffs on imports of foreign goods from various countries. The tariffs have generated vigorous policy debates. Those policy debates are not for the federal judiciary to resolve. 100% true. Rather, the judiciary's more limited role is to neutrally interpret and apply the law. Yep. I don't like how. What am I supposed to use to make the straight lines? I'm doing this wrong. I usually use the underline. Underline. The sole legal question here is whether under IEPA tariffs are meant to regulate importation. Statutory text, history, and precedent demonstrate that the answer is clearly yes. Clearly yes. Like quotas and embargoes, tariffs are a traditional and common tool to regulate importation. There you go. It's a traditional and common tool. It's been used all the time. But this bench doesn't like it. Since early U.S. history, Congress has regularly authorized the president to impose tariffs on imports of foreign goods. Presidents have often used that authority to obtain leverage with foreign nations, help American manufacturers and workers compete on a more level playing field, and generate revenue for the U.S. Numerous laws, such as the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, Trade Act of 1974, continue to authorize the president to place tariffs on foreign imports in a variety of circumstances, and presidents have often done so. In recent years, George W. Bush, Obama, and Biden all imposed tariffs on foreign imports under these statutory authorities. So you're pretending as if this never happened before. We saw the last three presidents do the exact same thing. Trump has similarly imposed tariffs and has done so here under IEEPA. Now, you don't like how sweeping it is, but during declared national emergencies, IEEPA broadly authorizes the president to regulate international economic transactions. Most relevant for this case, during those national emergencies, IEEPA grants the president power to regulate importation of foreign goods. Once he has the ability to regulate importation of foreign goods, regulate implies tax. That's common sense. In early 2025, Trump declared two national emergencies pursuant to the National Emergency Act. One emergency concerned drug trafficking in the United States, so we had that. And then the other one was trade imbalances with foreign nationals. To help address these emergencies, the president drew upon his authority in IEEPA to regulate importation, and he imposed tariffs on imports from various countries. The plaintiffs argue, the court concludes that the president lacks authority under IEEPA to impose tariffs. I disagree. In accord with Judge Taranto's careful and persuasive opinion of the Federal Circuit, I would conclude that the president's power under IEEPA to regulate importation encompasses tariffs. That's what they gave him. It's true that Congress had to give over some power, but IEEPA gives him that power. As a matter of ordinary meaning, including dictionary definitions and historical usage, the broad power to regulate importation includes traditional and common means to do so, in particular, quotas, embargoes, and tariffs. History and precedent confirm that conclusion. 1971, Nixon imposed 10% tariffs on almost all foreign imports. He levied the tariffs under IEEPA's predecessor statute, the Trading with the Enemy Act, which similarly authorized the president to regulate importation. So, Trading with the Enemy Act was basically what was replaced by IEEPA. Under IEEPA, Nixon did it, was able to do it. No one had a problem with it. In fact, his tariffs were ultimately upheld by the court. So when you have a statute that's replacing it and using the exact same language, what's the deal? How much more clear could it be? Moreover, in 1976, a year before IEEPA was enacted, this court unanimously ruled that a similarly worded statute authorized the president to adjust the imports permitted President Ford to impose monetary exactions on foreign oil imports. So what are you talking about? For both Nixon tariffs and the Ford tariffs upheld by the court in Algonquin, the relevant statutory provisions not specifically refer to tariffs or duties. So you're saying under your major questions doctrine that unless it specifically gives you that power, you don't have that power. Well, when they were drafting these statutes, they knew how it was interpreted by the court beforehand. This is part of what's so stupid about inventing a brand new theory. Because now you can basically look at any statute and try and dissect it to rip it apart if you don't like it. Will instead more broadly authorize the president to regulate importation or adjust the imports. So if that's what the power it's giving him, and that's how it was interpreted, and then Congress now comes along, and we have prior courts saying if it's matching the same language in the next statute, well, in that case, it's going to be fine, and they match the same language. And you're like, oh, no, it doesn't mean that anymore. So when IEEPA was enacted in 1977, after what happened with Nixon and Ford tariffs and the Algonquin decision, which said, hey, we're gonna follow the same thing if we see similar language, Congress and the public plainly would have understood that the power to regulate importation included tariffs. So even under your major questions doctrine, it still is clear that it includes tariffs. If Congress wanted to exclude tariffs from IEEPA, it surely would not have enacted the same broad regulated importation. Why would they do that when they saw how the court interpreted it? Why would they possibly do that? And that's the truth. Congress could override the national emergency. If you ask me what makes sense, I'll tell you what makes the most sense to me. To be fair, okay? Because I don't like, I'm not arguing for Trump per se. I'm arguing for what logic dictates. If you ask me what is the most healthiest way to approach this, the healthiest way to approach this is to basically say to yourself, if Congress has ceded this power, they probably should have the right to withdraw this power too, without requiring the president's signature on it. So Congress gives a power to the president. I think that Congress should have the right to withdraw that power and say, we think that you're abusing it now. And frankly, I think it should be a simple majority. That would make sense. That would make sense. That would be a reasonable way to read this as to like, is there an emergency or not? You want to turn this decision on that and have Congress come out and say, we think that this is a poor excuse for an emergency. Okay, that I can understand. So they're using the exact same language that had just been used to justify major American tariffs on foreign imports. Importantly, IEEPA's authorization for the president to impose tariffs did not grant the president any new substantive power. Since the founding, numerous statutes have authorized and still do authorize the president to impose tariffs and other foreign import restrictions. IEEPA is just doing the same thing. Context and common sense buttress that interpretation of IEEPA. The plaintiffs and the court acknowledge that IEEPA authorized the president to impose quotas. And this is part of what Trump was talking about. He said, hey, they're saying I can have quotas. Or embargoes on foreign imports. So you know what he can do? You can say, oh, okay, you want to send us your little Thailand tchotchkelach? All right, we'll take 5 of them. After that, you need to, we're having an embargo beyond that, unless you want to buy your way out of the embargo. And they said the embargo was fine. So we'll give you a license fee outside the embargo. Boom. It's not a tariff. It's a license fee. And if you think that that's not going to work, or you think that's legally invalid, I'll make this point to you. We see the concept of a license fee be used all the time to circumvent otherwise well-established law. I'll tell you right now, if you want to rent an office in New York today, you're a small business, and you'll say, you know what, I really need to be located in New York City. So I'm going to rent a small office there and operate out of there. That is literally impossible. There is no such thing as renting an office. And you say to me, Joe, how can that possibly be? If I go right now online, I can find all these different people who are offering offices that I can rent. Well, that's true. They're listed as rentals, but they are not rentals. Because when you get there, if you come to terms with the manager of the building, they are not going to give you a rental agreement. They give you a license. And they say, you're not a tenant. You're licensing the space from us. It's our space. The reason they do that is because then when they go to, if they have problems collecting on payment from you, they have a much easier basis. It's much easier for them to clean you on out of there and use terms that are relatively abusive because it's considered, it's not a rental. You're not renting the space. You have a license to use it. It's our space. You have a license, and we're giving you a license to come in there and work. So, and that's throughout New York City. So circumventing all the rental protections that are designed to have primarily for residential places, but even for commercial, but they're tended to have some level of protection for commercial. And they basically circumvent all of that by calling it a license. This is how the law is used to basically twist into like basically And now are those that have power, enable those that have power to do whatever they want. So that's what I'm saying is, yeah, it's going to look and smell exactly like a tariff. It might be called a tariff, but he's just going to call it a license. And under this decision, totally fine. He has a right to have a license. Meaning that a president could completely block some or all imports. But they say the IEEPA does not authorize the president to employ the lesser power of tariffs, which is retarded, which simply condition imports on payment. As they interpret the statute, the president could, for example, block all imports from China, but cannot order even a $1 tariff on goods imported from China. How does that make any sense? The approach does not make much sense. It doesn't. The answer is it doesn't. People read IEEPA. Properly read, IEEPA does not draw such an odd distinction between quotas and embargoes on the one hand and tariffs on the other. Rather, it empowers the president to regulate imports during national emergencies with the tools presidents have traditionally and commonly used, including quotas, embargoes, and tariffs. The court today nonetheless includes otherwise and holds that IEEPA does not authorize the president to impose tariffs to deal with the declared drug trafficking and trade deficit emergencies. But the court's decision is splintered. In today's 6-justice majority, 3 justices, Sotomayor, Kagan, and Jackson, interpret IEEPA not to authorize tariffs as a matter of ordinary statutory interpretation. I disagree for the reasons noted above and elaborate on at length in this opinion. 3 other justices, Roberts, Gorsuch, and Barrett, lean on the major questions canon of statutory interpretation to resolve this case. That important canon requires clear congressional authorization for an executive action or major economic and political significance, particularly when the executive exercises an unheralded power. The major questions doctrine. In my view, as I'll explain, the major questions canon does not have control here for 2 alternative and independent reasons. So now this is Kavanaugh not kiboshing the major questions doctrine. This is him basically saying, I don't like using the major questions doctrine here. First, the statutory text, history, and precedent constitute we have clear congressional authorization for the president to impose tariffs under IEEPA. In particular, throughout American history, presidents have commonly imposed tariffs as a means to regulate the importation. So tariffs were not like some unheralded power that no one ever heard of it being used before when Congress enacted IEEPA. So Congress knew that, hey, this is probably going to be read that way when they drafted it in 1977 and authorized the president to regulate importation of foreign goods. So the major questions doctrine is satisfied here. Second, in any event, the court has never before applied the major questions doctrine on the foreign affairs context, including foreign trade. This is the first time, so this is very bothersome. They're not just using major questions doctrine, but in this case, they are broadening it to involve foreign affairs, which is not an area that Congress even has any domain. Rather, as Justice Robert Jackson summarized, remains true. This court has always recognized the unwisdom of requiring Congress in this field of government power to lay down narrowly definite standards by which the president is to be governed. In foreign affairs cases, and this is a significant point that he's making here. So what he's really getting at is, because from Kavanaugh's perspective, because it's a foreign affairs case, which courts read the statute as written and do not employ major questions doctrine as a thumb on the scale against the president. Because this is a foreign affairs question, Kavanaugh says foreign affairs is really the domain of the president, so we shouldn't be trying to read things that's restricting his power. Although I firmly disagree with the court's holding today, the decision might not substantially constrain a president's ability to order tariffs going forward. That is because numerous other federal statutes authorize the president to impose tariffs and might justify most, if not all, the tariffs at issue in this case, albeit perhaps with a few additional procedural steps that IEEPA as an emergency statute does not require. So there's other ways that Kavanaugh's recognizing there's other ways to get there. Like you got the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, Trade Act of 1974, Tariff Act of 1930. In essence, the court today concludes the president concludes that the president checked the wrong statutory box by relying on IEEPA rather than another statute to impose the tariffs. In the meantime, so what he's basically saying is, you know what? You can just have your tariffs under these other statutes. You can just open up your tariffs there. That's how Kavanaugh's reading it. Kavanaugh's reading it the same way Trump is. Same way. In the meantime, however, the interim effects of the court's decision could be substantial. You're thinking you're fixing a problem here? You're creating problems. The United States may be required to refund billions of dollars to importers who paid the IEEPA tariffs, even though some importers may have already passed on costs to consumers or others. So they're going to have to now, we're going to pay them back even though they passed those costs on and charge more money for their goods. So they already made more money because they charged the tariffs, and now you're going to basically say they potentially could claim to be reimbursed. As was acknowledged at oral argument, the refund process is likely to be a mess. It's going to be a disaster that's coming here. So all you're doing is generating uncertainty. The only issue for the court today is one of law. That's all you should be focusing on. In light of the statutory text, long-standing historical practice, and relevant Supreme Court precedents, I would conclude that IEEPA authorizes the president to regulate importation by imposing tariffs on foreign imports during declared national emergencies. I therefore respectfully dissent. Now, I promised we were going to go through my adversary. I've said over and over again that the benefit of these tariffs is substantial when wielded by a negotiating president like Trump. No, I'd rather not have the Chevron doctrine. The Chevron doctrine was a disaster. I'm not advocating for the Chevron doctrine. No, the Chevron doctrine was a disaster. The Chevron doctrine, it's not like you have to, it's not an either or question. I think that's a false framing. The Chevron doctrine says when in doubt, they can basically decide how a rule is read. And I can understand why you think that's what I'm arguing for is that they should be able to, that the major questions doctrine basically is saying that the courts shouldn't be able to just decide willy-nilly. But the point of the Chevron doctrine is that they basically said that the Chevron doctrine was essentially saying that administrative agencies are experts in certain areas, so they have the final say on various matters that are in their respective domains, which was ridiculous. It was utterly ridiculous. But that's the extreme on the other end of things. See what I'm saying? Because that's basically saying they're the ones. That's the court saying we want to have absolute that the district court and the circuit court should have zero say into like determining how a statute gets read, which is absurd. That's absurd. That's very different from the Supreme Court saying, well, we're going to invoke major questions doctrine whenever we want to overturn something. Either extreme is wrong. Court is supposed to basically make sure, hey, if something is being applied in a bizarre way by a particular executive agency, in that case, that should be able to be checked down, and they should basically say, is this the proper way of reading this statute or not? Because that's what courts are supposed to be experts at. But to basically say that what this major questions doctrine is saying is we're going to read it. Here's why it's a different concept, and I'm glad you brought this up because I think this is a great question that you're asking here, Inventive Harvest. Sometimes a $2 question can be a great question. There's a concept in law in New York, and I believe in all 50 states, of construing a vague term against the drafter. So what this means is this. You buy something from a store, and it comes with a contract which has a long thing, and basically you get that in the mail, and you'll often see this, right? On a bill of lading, you'll see there's a whole series of things in very fine print there, and they tell you sign at the bottom, you sign at the bottom, right? That's drafted by the shipper, the merchants, not the shipper. The merchants who sells it to you is the one who drafts that. Let's say you end up in a dispute with this merchant now, and they point to the contract, and they point to clause 47 of the contract, and you read it and you say, I don't think clause 47 says what you say. I read this as being something different, and this becomes a key element of our dispute. So there's a concept of interpreting it against the drafter, that if there's a vague term, that gets interpreted against the drafter. So essentially, so you would win that your reading, if it's a logical reading, would rule the day when you get to court, because they would say, oh yeah, since it was drafted by the other side, we're going to look at this vague term and read it in favor of you because they created this vague term, right? So that's, now when it comes to the major questions doctrine, it's a similar type of thing where they're saying if Congress is vague, we're going to view that against the executive branch, which is a little bit of a strange concept. They're basically saying we're going to limit what Congress is saying. If it's something that's a significant thing, we're going to read it against the executive agency and or the president. Okay, so that's dispute now, where you're basically trying to say, how are we going to interpret this statute? So much like in a contract, you would say, is this contract something that, who are we going to read this contract in favor of? So too, we're going to read this statute against the executive branch, right? Or in this case, against the president directly. He's part of the executive. He's obviously the chief executive branch. But we're going to read it again, who we're reading this vague term against, right? So that's what it is. Now the Chevron, basically what they would do is if they're reinventing something that's brand new, and they're basically saying, well, we're looking at this as now opening up a Pandora's box so that we can do this, that, and we're going to have there's no one there to dispute them on it. There's nothing left to dispute on it. So it's not a court. In the Chevron case, it's not a matter of the court saying, well, we're going to read it in your favor. In the Chevron, under the Chevron doctrine, the court is saying, we're going to step back from it. We're going to have nothing to do with this. And we're just going to defer to that executive agency. Whatever they decide to say, we're just going to defer to them because they're the experts in this area. So it's almost, so in the Chevron doctrine, what's ended up happening is it's almost like they're saying, we're going to send this to an arbitrator, and the arbitrator is you, executive agency. That's not akin to what's happening over here in the major questions doctrine. Major questions doctrine is, how do we interpret this? Whose side do we draft in? But the Chevron doctrine is, who's the ultimate decider? Who's sitting as the judge? So I like your question, because it shows that you're bringing up something that seems facially to be on point, but that's a very key distinction. The key distinction is that in what we're talking about here is, how do you interpret a statute? And the Chevron doctrine is, who is interpreting the statutes? Who has authority to interpret that? Great question. Now, I promised that I was going to pull up this video from John Mansell.
Maybe.
That's not the right one.
The links that there have been.
That's not the right one. This is the right one. I think this is a good time for us to do that. Let me just make sure I didn't miss anything here. This is your friend John Mansell. He's a regular watcher of the show. Great guy, very intelligent guy. And he put out this video, which is response to Good Lawgic on tariffs. Okay. I don't remember which element of tariffs he was arguing with me about. I think that he hates tariffs in general. So let's see what he has to say.
Hey, Joe. Thank you very much for inviting me to come on the other day. I wish I could have gotten through, but I guess Google Voice didn't want to let that happen. But I really appreciated your mindset or your willingness to hear a position fully fleshed out that you disagree with. I completely agree with you that civil discourse is basically gone in our country, and so hearing each other out is the best way to combat that. And so, yeah, I wanted to, I guess, flesh out a couple of my points. You mentioned something on laid back law on Friday that actually really codified for me what our point of dissent is. So you mentioned that Trump is using the tariffs to make America better. And whether or not that is happening, or you can make arguments for whether or not it is happening, for me, that's fundamentally not the role of government, right? For me, fundamentally, the role of government is to protect liberty. That is the only thing that they do. That.
Okay. And I understand his position. It's literally not what he ran on, though. What he ran on was make America great again. Right? It's not. So that's your position as a libertarian. But what he ran on is that he was going to make us great again. And that's what, that's how he got 77 million votes, was running on that he's making America great again.
Has a just reason for being. It is the only reason we have a government, is to protect liberties of individuals. And so as a libertarian, we don't believe in positive rights. We only believe in negative rights. So positive rights would be things like the right to healthcare, the right to education, the right to living wage. Basically any kind of like central planning thing where the government.
Let me speed it up. I can speed it up for you. I'll speed it up to 1 1/4. We'll add the little closed caption, and we'll speed this up to 1 1/4.
Gives you a thing, whereas negative rights are the right to not have the government take a thing from you, right? So it's all the things that the government can't do. Basically, if you look through the whole bill of
Civil
rights,
liberties,
all of those are
correct.
Pretty much negative rights.
Almost all of them, right? Even like the freedom of speech and all that is saying you will not tramp on our freedom of speech. So it's the government handcuffing itself from doing things. That's correct.
One of the reasons we don't believe in positive rights is because the only way that government, who doesn't actually produce anything, to give a positive right is by violating someone else's negative rights. So if the government wants to provide free healthcare, it has to either force a doctor to work, right? Or it has to
tax
take
us
money from the collective and then pay a doctor to do the work.
Right.
So either way, like the only way government ever does a positive right is by violating a negative right. And so, yeah, we don't support that in practice or in theory or whatever.
I don't see, but with respect to tariffs, all right, well, like I said, this comes down to as to whether or not tariffs are necessarily a tax on us.
And then on a practical sense, just looking at the track record of government, it's not a thing I'm interested in giving them more room to explore. Basically, my entire life.
In general, I agree with this. In general, I agree with that. Whatever government touches, it turns to crap. This is why socialism basically is advocating for the worst possible trustee to handle things.
Government has been promising that they're going to take more money now, but don't worry, it's going to make things cheaper in the long run, or it's going to make things better in the long run.
Respectfully disagree. Tariff is not a tax.
Or it's going to, I don't know, somehow improve things. And basically their track record has been crap for
100% agree.
Life. Every time they take money, they make things worse, right?
It's been crap for 10 times your lifetime.
Like raising taxes has never actually driven costs down. It is just making things worse. Central planning is always a failure. Just let the market do it. If you want to, do the whole rising tide raises all ships things, government should do what government should have been doing the whole time and just get out.
Laissez-faire.
Right?
Laissez-faire.
Just like cut all the regulation, cut taxes, cut all the spending that government is doing, cut all the, the money printing that they're doing. Yeah, that would be great. That would increase the standard of living for everyone across the board.
I agree with you on this. I agree with you on this. I don't want to cut you off, but I want to hear
take our money or like drive costs up so that the consumer or Americans generally have to pay a higher price so that certain industries in America, like a small group of people, can have protection on their industry. No, I don't want government doing that.
I agree with you on this too, which might surprise you, but I do. That concept of protectionism, I agree with you. That's bad.
Want to give more.
I remember the first time I disagreed with Tucker. This is when he was, before he became Qatari, before he became Candace Carlson. The first time I disagreed with him on something was on economic policy, when he was basically talking about how if we have automated delivery of, if we could use automation for our trucking services, that would be a disaster for our country. So we should never do it. Because the best job opportunity for someone who has limited skills is to be a truck driver, and someone who has limited intellect is to be a truck driver, and accordingly, we would just be leaving them jobless. So because of that, we shouldn't engage in that. And I'm like, that's such a backward, stupid perspective. Like, there's no other jobs. There's always other jobs that can be done. There's always other jobs. Here's an example, okay? Here's an example. If you want to pay those same people to beautify our highways, you do that. I mean, there's a million different jobs you can do if that's what you're looking to do. If that's what you're looking for them to have work. There's other ways to implement them in ways that, and if it can be done more efficiently by automation, cheaper, more efficiently, overall the country becomes a more beautiful place that way. So the idea of the government working to protect our job markets, I think, is dumb.
Power to government to do that. Whether you could just give it to Trump now and it disappears the next time a president's in office, don't care. I don't want any president doing it. No president has done it well. Government has never done it well. Central planning never works. Do not drive up my costs so that some other protected sector can do well.
Okay, so
I don't like distributed costs for concentrated benefits. This is, the farming lobby, the sugar lobby, the healthcare lobby, like all of these special interests. This is what they do, right? We are going to distribute costs among everybody, and then this small group of people is protected and they get the concentrated benefits. It's never worked out well. I have zero interest in giving the president more authority to do that. I don't care. I don't know what.
We're not really giving him more authority. It's either authority that he has or he does not have. He either has the authority or he doesn't. So he's basically wielding authority that he has until it's determined that he doesn't have that authority.
They think is going to happen. It's never worked out. Government has never gotten it right. And it's not something I want government to do any more of. I want them to get out of the way. I want them to cut regulations. I want them to stop trying to do that exact sort of thing. And then on a, I guess, practical consequentialist standpoint, because I did want to see, like, okay, is it making things better? Because, philosophy aside, does it actually work? And if we look at, so I asked ChatGPT, I won't go through the whole thing, but you can do something like this if you'd like. Give me a breakdown on tariffs historically and specifically Trump's, who's bearing the cost. And basically it agreed, and everything I've been able to find is that, yeah, the Americans are paying the cost of tariffs. We always do. It never makes things better. There's a whole bunch of examples of government always thinks that tariffs are going to make things better for the home.
I wouldn't trust ChatGPT on this. I mean, AI tends to be, we've seen so much evidence that AI is tilted, that them coming out with something saying that Trump's tariffs are hurting Americans is, I don't trust that.
Home population, they never do. I said to steelman the argument for and against. I cannot find either a theoretical or a practical argument that government is ever going to get it right with tariffs. The most recent studies.
I think he's very intelligent. I totally disagree with you, Richard. I think he's very intelligent. I mean, a lot of what he's saying here makes sense. I just think there's certain elements that he's missing. I'm going to let him finish before I assume that he didn't cover them.
Or basically every study I've been able to find is saying that Americans are paying anywhere from like 84 to 94% of the cost of the tariffs, both in his previous term and in this term. So yeah, that is distributed.
Okay, well, I'll come to that.
Benefits. We are paying more money for this idea that, oh, but there's concentrated benefits. Like this sector is going to get better, which means that American business is going to do better, which means that all those, those benefits are going to be better for the American economy as a whole. But you have to raise the cost for me now in order to make that happen. This study, and you can find like a bunch of different basically things.
Yeah, but if it's a 20-year benefit for a 4-month pain, like that's not worth it. Like, why would you assume that that's like? I don't understand that.
Are mostly all coming from this study that was done, or this article is based on this study.
National Bureau of Economic Research. I don't know anything about NBER. I never heard of them before. But National Bureau of Economic Research.
I don't know. You can look through a bunch of.
Let me see if I can find anything on NBER, what they are. Let's see, they're about. Featured working papers. Programs to support women's technology. Academic plagiarism and political selection. Investing in emerging and developing economies. Measuring Brexit's economic toll on the UK. Women's college majors and family choices. Yeah, so this sounds like it's probably a whole bunch of I'm not saying that their numbers are wrong. I'm simply questioning the source here when I look and see like a whole bunch of leftist college professors coming in with their findings. I'm like, okay, how much of their I always question when I'm looking at that, like what percentage, how much of their findings were predetermined? Supreme Court increasingly favors the rich. So yeah, I'm seeing a little trend here, and I don't think you chose them intentionally. You just asked ChatGPT and they gave you this. But my point is that ChatGPT is giving you information. It's garbage in, garbage out. It's taking like stuff from a source that, excuse me, it seems littered with academia and their leftist policy and their leftist perspectives to draw their conclusions as to who's paying for this. And of course, they're going to be saying that the American consumer is paying for it.
Of other competing sources.
And I want to be clear, I'm not faulting John on this at all. This is the struggle with living in a post-truth world. We're living in an era now where people care much more about framing than about portraying accurate information. So I'm sufficiently grounded enough to tell you that I don't know that tariffs are costing Americans money or that there's a net benefit to them. I simply don't know. I feel as if a lot of people will draw conclusions based on a predetermined outcome. And they're not going to tell you that that's where they're coming from.
Or whatever. But yeah, and then just quickly before Jim tells you, this is Trump endorsing Massey during the last presidential election, and then Massey endorsing Trump in the last election. So yes, it is true. He did not endorse him in 2016. He did in 2024 say that he believed that Trump will put Americans first by securing our liberties at home.
Yeah, okay. So libertarian choosing between Trump and Kamala Harris chose Trump. I don't know what that means. I mean, that's okay. So you're basically like, this devil is better. You're basically like, yeah, I'd rather get punched from Massey's perspective is I'd rather take 10 punches in the face than rather than, being handed a Harry Carry knife.
And that is what we want him to do. We don't want him, controlling what choices we do or do not make as far as like who we buy from, who we don't buy from. He didn't want, or like the libertarians, we don't want the president making those decisions for us. We want the president to just get the government out of the way. That's what we're looking for. Yeah. So,
I understand that.
Hopefully
I understand that.
Show kind of like what my opinion is. And then very, very quickly. So these two are being shown in Brave. And then if you go to Chrome and look through these. So this is, this is what happens in Chrome. You got pop-ups, you got basically just full of ads. You got stuff that's auto-playing, more ads, just all this garbage. So, if you ever feel like checking out a different browser, Brave is an option for you. Great, cool, a pop-up. Anyway, all right. Love hearing your stuff, Joe. I genuinely am a big fan.
Thank you,
I listen
brother.
to probably all the episodes, usually the day after. Yeah, so love your stuff.
I appreciate that.
It was
Thank
cool
you.
To I guess talk out, and talk through my opinion. All right, thanks. Bye.
And I appreciate you sharing that. You go into the effort because you obviously put a great deal of effort in doing that. So what I would tell you is this. What Richard said, I disagree with his first comment. I disagreed with this comment, but I think I agree with a lot of what he's saying here, which is that you're living in, and this is what a lot of libertarians tend to do, is they tend to assume that other nations are going to be playing fair. And what we've seen historically is that's just not reality. You're not living in reality. So if you assume that other nations are playing fair, because they're not. When you're talking about, first and foremost, we're competing with the Chinese slave markets, where they're basically, working 6-year-old kids to death at 14 cents an hour. So, which is, basically what any of us would consider slavery. And trade embargoes and tariffs that we get hit with left and right, which ultimately, perhaps there's no one tariff which is particularly damaging to America. That's probably true. But when I talk about the fact that this enables, I think the example I gave on Wednesday was I was talking about the car manufacturing, and I was talking about how we can't sell cars in Europe because of the tariffs they put on the American automobile industry. That was one example out of thousands of examples. So when you consider the fact that we're getting hit with tariffs everywhere, I don't think you're appreciating the stranglehold that the world has had on our ability to engage in industry on the international stage. So that's why he gave such a global, that was the objective of his global tariffs, is because the globe had basically decided that they were going to take advantage of Americans' good nature, fair dealing, or the libertarian perspective of, we're not going to drop any tariffs. So if he's doing this and having us deal with these costs for 4 months or 4 years, ultimately, if this is helping us for 10 years, 20 years, it's not just the American car manufacturers, it's every industry. It's every industry. And when you're looking at it from that perspective, and the fact that tariffs are not a tax in the sense that much of tariffs end up getting eaten by other folks. So the tariffs we get hit with ultimately end up harming all of us. When we're trying to export, it ends up, when you're talking about it happening in Europe, in Asia, everywhere, in South America, in Canada, these different tariffs that we face that are harming our industry on a global level has stifled our ability to grow. So Trump being able to pare back those tariffs, so we're not dealing with them on an international level, invariably must make us all richer. Look what I do, okay? What do I do for a living? You'll see what I do for a living every night, right? You watch me every day, John. So I'll tell you right now that I'm obviously not engaged in industry. I'm engaging in a service. So tariffs that I'm facing, I mean that American industry ends up facing when they're trying to sell internationally, it's very hard for me to directly be able to point to this and say how that's going to be affecting me. But what I do know is this. A lot of you are engaged in industry. A lot of you are. So if you have less money, I'm making less money. If you're making money hand over fist, it's much easier for you to say, "Oh, okay, you know what? Let me engage with Joe on a more regular basis because money is flowing a lot more." So what I'm saying is, when the American piece of the pie grows, it's just mind-boggling to just pretend that that's not ultimately benefiting me. So if I'm making more money coming in here because people who might want to tip me or engage with me or whatever it is are or become followers or become follow me on locals, all these other different things that people might do, that if they have more money, that a tiny percentage of that will come to me, and that aggregates into being potentially a great deal of money. That's what I'm saying is it's as far as, and I'm not even I'm obviously not producing anything. I'm not trying to sell anything on an international level. But if you have more money, I am making more money. So if I can see how that's even affecting me, it's difficult to conceive of anyone who's in a service who's not ultimately benefiting from that. Anyone who's in a merit-based service, certainly. I mean, I guess certain services, like, teachers, doesn't seem like a very merit-based, service that they're providing there. But if you're in any kind of merit-based service, it's very difficult to conceive that you're not ultimately benefiting from having tariffs internationally being lowered. And like I said, the tariffs that he's charging are not something that's directly paid by us. And so that's why when you're trying to figure out, the benefit. So what I do know is, in the short term, that if there are tariffs and now all of a sudden my food bill goes up, or my equipment bill to maintain my show goes up because there's tariffs on the products that I'm purchasing on the international stage, I'm telling you right now that my objective is that through Americans having greater wealth, that I will ultimately be better off. So my costs will go up and my revenues can go up and far outshine that, and for a far lengthier period of time. That's the point. So the United States has been using tariffs since our country's founding. Even the early 1900s, so significant policy action when Warren G. Harding was president back in 22. Tariffs aren't new. You're completely correct. Fair enough, Joe. Not underdeveloped, college educated. No, I think it's less college educated. It's more of it's an adherence to libertarianism, which is ultimately having him come to that conclusion, and not recognizing some of the shortcomings that I think libertarianism has. That's really what it is. He's just, he's a diehard libertarian. So. Barrett Boy says, regarding history of tariffs, very first act of Congress on the new Constitution was a tariff for the purpose of funding government. It's because we didn't have an income tax. But the point is that was done by Congress, not by the president. So I appreciate you doing that. I gotta get back to work because I got a lot of work to do here. Before turning to the specifics of the IPATA text history and precedent, I briefly review several fundamental constitutional principles about the roles of three branches of the U.S. government with respect to this case. So we have the plaintiffs and their amici, echoed by the court, rhetorically emphasize Article 1, Section 8, talks about tax. That's your taxing power that's granted to the government. But that rhetoric is a red herring in the case because no one disputes that point. So we don't care. The president and everyone agrees that Congress has constitutional authority over tariffs. I'm not arguing that. Important principle here, as everyone also acknowledges, is that Congress may in turn authorize the president to impose tariffs, so they can pass that ability on to the president. And in fact, it seems they have. Since the beginning of the Republic, Congress has regularly empowered the president to order tariffs. So we see that he's had that power. Neither the plaintiffs nor the court suggested the numerous laws granting tariff power to the president violates the Constitution, separation of powers. Everyone admits that they could pass that power on. Secondly, and relatedly, the president does not claim unilateral authority to impose tariffs. On the contrary, the president's argument recognizes that in the exercise of his statutory tariff power under IEEPA, he must act within the scope of Congress's authorization. See, he's not trying to skirt the law. He's trying to work within what limitations he got from Congress. He's saying that he has that power. The president contends that Congress, by enacting IEEPA in 77, authorized the president to impose tariffs on foreign imports and declared national emergencies. To use the familiar vernacular of Justice Robert Jackson, the president argues this case falls into category 1, where the president is acting pursuant to express or implied authorization of Congress. The president has not asserted authority to impose IEEPA tariffs in peacetime emergency. Third, Congress possesses a variety of tools to limit the president's tariffs. Directly via new legislation, they can pass new legislation, or perhaps more readily by not approving annual appropriations necessary for the executive branch to continue to implement tariffs. So if they want to stop them, they have that ability. Importantly, the House, Senate, and the president annually approve most appropriations. As a result, each House of Congress and the president independently possesses de facto veto power over particular appropriations. Of course, many different appropriations items are usually considered and packaged together. So we're not ignoring the fact that the reality on the ground, which is that everything here is this big omnibus bill. But the point still stands that Congress isn't helpless if they actually want to get off their butts and do some work. They just don't like doing work. In Congress, moreover, everything is related to everything else, as the saying goes. Members and committees of Congress possess substantial tools of leverage over the executive branch. Congress could, for example, wield its authority over oversight legislation, confirmations, or appropriations to pressure the president to reduce or eliminate some or all of the IEEPA tariffs. They can pressure him if they wanted to. In light of Congress's appropriation authority and the other robust powers, it's not correct to suggest, as Chief Justice Roberts' opinion today elliptically does, that 2/3 majority of both houses of Congress would need to pass new legislation over presidential veto in order to limit IEEPA tariffs, or more generally, to restrict the president's use. Because they have other weapons at their disposal. We all know they do. Let's stop pretending that they don't have other weapons of pressuring the president. This case presents one straightforward question of statutory interpretation. Does Congress's explicit grant of authority in IEEPA for the president to regulate importation of foreign goods in a declared national emergency authorize the president to impose tariffs? We know he has powers. Does that include tariffs? And the answer is a clear yes. I begin, as always, with the statutory text. 1941, a few days after Pearl Harbor, Congress first enacted the relevant language of regulate importation. That's the language they've used. They used that in 1917 Trading with the Enemy Act, TWIA. In 1977, Congress split TWIA into two separate statutes. Congress amended TWIA to authorize the president to regulate importation during wartime only. Congress enacted a separate statute, IEEPA, that granted the president the power to regulate importation during peacetime, national emergencies. The relevant IEEPA text authorized the president to regulate importation by means of instructions, licenses, or otherwise. So it's very broad. Or otherwise here sounds very broad. As the term otherwise indicates, broadly worded statute does not exclude tariffs or dictate any specific means of regulating importation, and they could have excluded it if they were so inclined. And here's the thing also, given the history, if they really had a problem with it, they would have said no. Right? They would have said no if they had a problem with it. At the time of Tweeter's amendment in 1941 and IEPA's enactment in 1977, ordinary dictionary meaning of regulate was to control, to adjust by rule, or to subject to governing principles or laws. Imposing tariffs on imports is clearly a way of controlling imports. Governing or directing imports according to rule, adjusting imports by rule, method, or established mode. So the dictionary definitions amply demonstrate tariffs are meant to regulate importation of foreign imports. Consistent with those dictionary definitions and statutory references, tariffs historically have been and still are a common means to the United States to regulate importation of foreign goods. We've always been doing that. So let's stop pretending otherwise. So when we're trying to figure out what the term regulate importation means, the meaning of the related phrase regulate commerce is also instructive. That phrase has long been interpreted to encompass tariffs. So when we're talking about regulating, has been used to refer to tariffs. Since the founding, Constitution's assignment to Congress, the broad power to regulate foreign commerce has been understood to include tariffs on foreign imports. That's where their authority to raise and give tariffs is, right? It does say duties too. So too, Justice Story says the power to regulate commerce includes the power of laying duties to countervail the regulations and restrictions of foreign nations. That's all the way back in 1824. Sorry, that was 1833. It was Marshall in 1824. Who said that regulate commerce, even by the imposition of duties, was not controverted. Everyone understood this. To lay duties in common sense, executing the power to regulate commerce, Madison likewise stated that it cannot be inferred that the power to regulate trade does not involve a power to tax. So regulate is commonly been used to reference to taxes. Marshall, Story, and Madison make a formidable trio. They have a lot of historical impact, those three. And this court has long echoed the Marshall, Story, Madison understanding of tariffs regulate foreign commerce, the laying of a duty on imports. So history is here on his side as well. The plaintiffs in the court today seize on the word regulate in isolation and say it doesn't encompass the power to tariff. But the relevant statutory phrase is regulate importation. And we must look to the meaning of the phrase as a whole, as our precedents dictate. Two words together may assume a more particular meaning than those words in isolation. As I've explained since the founding, tariffs on foreign imports have been a common means of regulating foreign commerce, including imports. If the federal government's constitutional power to regulate foreign commerce includes tariffs, and regulate importation's power to regulate foreign commerce with respect to imports, then IEPA's authorization of the president to regulate importation clearly encompasses tariffs. That's based on our historical usage of those terms. And perhaps even more significantly, when IEPA was enacted in 1977, Congress and the public clearly would have understood the phrase regulate importation encompassed tariffs. That's what we read up above. We talked about Nixon and Ford and how it was used to reference regulating tariffs back then. Nixon tariffs did not fly below the radar. You shouldn't think that it was just ignored back then. On the contrary, President Nixon announced the worldwide 10% tariffs in a primetime address to the nation on August 5th, 1971. And he imposed tariffs as a tool to make certain American products will not be at a disadvantage and the product of American labor will be more competitive. President Nixon sought to remove the unfair edge that some of our foreign competition has, and he declared that when the unfair treatment is ended, the import tax will end. So how is this different? Nixon tariffs applied to almost all imports of foreign goods into the U.S., and the tariffs had no time limits. To be sure, they did not end up lasting forever, but Nixon terminated them only because the tariffs, as intended, induced major American trading partners to negotiate new agreements. So it worked. The Nixon tariffs garnered substantial national and international attention and were generally popular in Congress. Predictably, however, the tariffs sparked litigation challenges. So this came to the Supreme Court before. In 1975, the Court of Customs and Patent Appeals, which are the predecessor to the Federal Circuit, upheld the Nixon tariffs as a lawful exercise. Why? Because they're regulating importation. 2 years later, in 1977, Congress divided TWIA into two. And Congress retained the same language when they already saw how it was interpreted by the court. In doing so, members of Congress were plainly aware, after all, how could they not be, that regulate importation language had recently been invoked by the president and interpreted by the courts to encompass tariffs. That's what it plainly means, which is why major questions doctrine should not apply here. Indeed, the House Committee report noted that the relevant regulate importation provision in TWIA came into play when on August 15, 1971, Nixon declared a national emergency with respect to the balance of payments crisis, and under the emergency imposed a surcharge on imports. The report further referenced the appeals court holding in Yoshida that TWIA authorized imposition of duties because of the existence of a national emergency. The Nixon tariffs persuasively demonstrates that members of Congress and the public would have understood the phrase regulate importation to include tariffs when IEEPA was enacted. So when they know what they're doing when they're drafting IEEPA, they knew what they were drafting, they knew how it would be interpreted, and they were fine with it. So why is this court not fine with it? If they weren't fine with it, Congress would have excluded tariffs from IEEPA's scope. Neither the plaintiffs nor the court today offers a good answer to that question. Understandably so, because there is no good answer. The court tries to dodge the force of the Nixon tariffs by observing that one appeals court interpretation regulating importation to uphold President Nixon's tariffs doesn't suffice to describe that interpretation as well settled. It is that it becomes well settled when Congress knows about it. It's not the right question. The question is what members of Congress and the public would have understood regulate importation to mean when Congress enacted IEEPA. Given the significant well-known Nixon tariffs, it's entirely implausible to think that Congress's 1977 reenactment of the phrase regulate importation in IEEPA was somehow meant to understood to exclude tariffs. Why would anyone think such a thing? Second, if one holds any lingering doubts about Congress and public's understanding of the power to regulate importation, in that case, a second episode shortly before IEEPA's enactment should answer them. In 1975, Ford imposed significant monetary exactions on foreign imports of oil. So, his proclamation under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962. Like TWIA and IEEPA, the relevant provisions use the same, didn't say the word tariff or duty. It just said that it authorized the president to adjust imports of a product, which is very akin to regulate importation. In contrast to Nixon tariffs, the Ford tariffs on oil imports generated some pushback in Congress. Congress didn't like what Ford did. A group of utility companies in the state and states quickly sued, arguing that the relevant statutory phrase "adjust imports" doesn't give you tariff power. Over a dissent, the D.C. Circuit agreed with the plaintiffs challenging the Ford tariffs. Much like the court decision today, the D.C. court in Ford matter concluded that Congress must explicitly authorize monetary exactions. The applicable statutory phrase "adjust imports" did not do so. In 1976, the Ford tariffs came to the Supreme Court. In this court, the plaintiffs pressed nearly identical arguments, and those advanced by the plaintiffs and repeated by the court in today's case. Plaintiffs argue that the Ford imposed monetary exactions involved the broadest exercise of tariff power in the history of the American Republic. Same thing we're hearing today. Broadest taxing, right? Instead, it's reminiscent of George III's stamp tax. They contend the statute's authorization to the president to adjust imports did not allow for such monetary exactions. They said you're using it too much. What they say? You're turning a major question here. It's a major economic policy. You shouldn't be able to do it. They asserted this court had never implied a tax Never in the history of the court from language from which it did not explicitly provide tax. Sounds very similar to the arguments today. And they said, here, there's no such language. You have to overturn it. They echo the D.C. Circuit's holding that reading the phrase adjust the imports to encompass tariffs would be an anomalous departure from the consistently explicit, well-defined manner in which Congress has delegated control over foreign trade. And they claim that interpreting the statute to include fees undermines the whole tariff structure of the United States. Importantly, the Algonquin plaintiffs acknowledged, as the plaintiffs today, that the statutory language adjust the imports would allow the president to impose quotas and embargoes on foreign imports. They said you can do that, you just can't give tariffs. So the president could completely block all imports or limit their quantity. But adjust imports language doesn't give you a power to hit with tariffs. What happened with that case? Well, in 1976, the court unanimously reversed the D.C. Circuit Court and flatly rejected these arguments. That's what this court said in 1976. It said these arguments are crap. The same ones that you have 6 justices endorsing today, 1976, 50 years ago, they said that these arguments are crap. The court held that the statutory phrase adjust the imports, even though it did not include such terms as tariff, tax, duty, fee, granted Ford authority to impose not only quotas and embargoes, but also monetary exactions on foreign imports. The court analyzed the statutory text and found no support in the language of the statute for the plaintiff's argument that the adjust imports should be read to encompass only quantitative methods like quotas, license fees affecting such adjustments. And the court explained, unless one assumes, and we do not, that quotas will always be a feasible method of dealing directly with national security threats imposed by the circumstances under which imports are entering the country, limiting the president to the use of quotas would effectively and artificially prohibit him from dealing directly with some of the very problems with which 232 is directed. You're handcuffing him for no reason, in contradiction to what the entire objective of this statute is. So according to the anonymous Algonquin court, statutory text structure and logic established his authority to adjust imports and also included monetary exactions such as tariffs and fees. Today's case should follow a fortiori from Algonquin. Therefore, no meaningful daylight exists between the statutory phrase adjust the imports and regulate importation. If anything, regulate importation sounds like more. The plaintiffs and the court in this case do not even try to distinguish adjust the imports from regulate importation, nor could they. It's a ridiculous read. Because the definition of regulate under Black's Law Dictionary, which is that's like the Bible for how to interpret language, includes adjust by rule. To adjust imports is to regulate imports. Indeed, if anything, the phrase regulate is broader, which is what we have here. We have the broader language here. So, if Section 232's adjust the imports includes tariffs, as this court unanimously decided in Algonquin, just a year before IEEPA, how can IEEPA's regulate importation not include tariffs? Blows up their argument. Algonquin's importance for today's case rests not merely on its status as unanimous on point Supreme Court statutory precedent. It's surely significant for that reason as well. It's especially consequential for present purposes because it helps shows the ordinary public and congressional understanding of regulate importation. In 1977, when they were enacting IEEPA, everyone was on the same page what Congress was signing off on, and what they were signing off on was clearly that the president in a national emergency could drop tariffs or raise tariffs. To be clear, the question here is not what individual members of Congress might have subjectively intended. The question is the ordinary meaning of the understanding of the words that Congress used. What do those words mean? Does it mean to tariff or not? And in 1977, it very obviously meant tariffs. Given that phrase, adjust the imports, and he's getting a little repetitive here, it's ridiculous to think that regulate importation in IEEPA excluded tariffs. The court today tries its best to distinguish Algonquin on the ground that Section 232 includes sweeping language authorizing the president to take such action that he deems necessary, whereas IEEPA does not. But that's not what the Algonquin court did. They didn't rely on the language of what he deems necessary. They relied on adjust the imports. That's how they got to it. Moreover, IEEPA itself broadly authorizes the president to regulate importation by means of instructions, licenses, or otherwise. So we have broad language here too. He's making some really sharp points here. The fact that this was ignored by Barrett and Roberts shows you, respectively, I think they start with a predetermination. The predetermination is they don't want these tariffs. They wanted to sever this power from Trump. The court also attempts to brush aside Algonquin by citing an entirely different provision of the Trade Expansion Act, one that was not an issue in Algonquin. It expressly refers to duty. But they didn't rely on that. The Algonquin court didn't rely on that either. So, to sum up, Nixon and Ford tariffs when enacting IEEPA, when enacting IEEPA, Congress employed the exact language invoked by President Nixon to justify tariffs, as did Ford with his exacting financial punishments. And they used the same language, if not more limited language, and the court said it's okay. And Congress had to be aware of that when they were drafting IEEPA, which informs us that they purposefully allowed him to do it. Two additional historical points. One, U.S. history from 1800s through IEEPA's 1977 enactment illustrates how the statute came to incorporate the president's long recognized authority to impose tariffs during wartime, and then also during peacetime national emergencies. Long before the initial 1917 enactment of the Trading with the Enemy of TWIA, which was IEEPA's predecessor, the president possessed inherent wartime authority to prohibit commercial relations. For example, during the Mexican-American War, President Polk permitted only limited trade with Mexico subject to tariffs. Some members of Congress publicly questioned whether the president possessed that tariff authority. Polk justified the tariffs on the ground that the military right to exclude commerce altogether from the port of the enemy and our military occupation include the minor right of admitting it under prescribed conditions, which is a concept in law of if the greater is allowed, then certainly the lesser is too. In 1854, Supreme Court agreed with President Polk's view, stating no one can doubt that the president as commander-in-chief of our naval force has the authority to regulate import duties. 1862, Lincoln partially lifted an assisting blockade against the Confederate States during the Civil War. And like Polk, he then permitted limited trade, subject to monetary fee. A group of cotton sellers later sued, arguing the fee was essentially a tax, not authorized by Congress. The Supreme Court rejected that argument, holding that there was no question that requiring a monetary fee to trade with the Confederates was part of the war power of the U.S. government. The existence of war meant suspension of commercial intercourse between opposing sections of the country. And if you had the power to stop you from bringing it in here, you certainly had the right to tax them for it. 1898, McKinley imposed duties upon the occupation of any forts and places in the Philippine Islands. Court subsequently recognized these McKinley duties as lawful wartime measure. Why does the wartime history matter? Because when Congress first enacted the Trading with the Enemy Act with TWIA in 1917 during World War I, it codified some of the president's longstanding inherent wartime powers, which included tariff power. 1933, during the Depression, 5 days after Roosevelt took office, Congress expanded TWIA to apply not only to wartime, but during national emergency declared by the president. 8 years later, 1941, after Pearl Harbor, Congress again amended TWIA's language by more succinctly providing the president may regulate certain transactions, including importation. Under TWIA, during war or any other period of national emergency declared by the president. So as of 1941, and from then to 1977, TWIA expressly authorized the president to regulate importation, wartime and during peacetime. Historically, presidents had regulated importation. How? Tariffs. You see it with Polk, Lincoln, McKinley. So TWIA from 41 to 77 was best understood to authorize tariffs. Everyone understood this. During that period, as I've discussed at length, so the importance of raising the history here is to say, what are they trying to say when they say regulate importation? Does that mean tariffs or not? Well, historically, it always meant that. That's what we were talking about here. So why are you coming to a conclusion? Nah. Why? Because they come up with this whole major questions doctrine. Let's construe it against him. But even construing against him makes no sense because it's not vague. It's not a vague thing. The point that he's making is it's pretty clear. He's reviewing the history here again from Nixon and how it had to inform us that what Congress was thinking in 1977 when they passed IEPA. Second, contrary to the tenor of plaintiffs and the court's argument here, it could not have been at all unusual or surprise in Congress when enacting IEPA in 1977 to authorize the president to impose tariffs. Since the early days of the Republic, Congress has regularly granted the president power to regulate foreign trade, including via tariffs. Here's a few examples. 1810, Congress authorized president to prohibit imports from Great Britain or France if either nation violated neutral commerce of the United States. 1890, Congress granted the president power to impose import duties in response to duties imposed by other countries. So we see that this is a power that's regularly given to him when there's problems. 1922, empower the president to levy import duties under certain conditions. 1930, 1962, they did it again. 1974, under Section 201 of the Trade Act, grants the president power to take all appropriate and feasible action within his power. So too, Section 301 authorizes the president to direct the U.S. trade representatives to impose duties on countries engaging in unfair trade practices. Section 122 of the Act grants the president power to impose a temporary import surcharge. The reason he's going through these examples is to basically say no one should think it's a weird thing that they allow him to impose tariffs. They do it all the time. And they have done this throughout our nation's history. Those many statutes definitively establish that Congress, since near the founding, has delegated to the president broad power to impose tariffs on foreign imports. So none of this is shocking at all. You might even ask why the president needed distinct tariff authority under IEPA during peacetime emergencies, or for that matter under TWIA. The basic answer is that IEPA is an emergency statute that allows the president to impose tariffs somewhat more quickly, as would be expected in a declared national emergency. Similarly, in wartime, TWIA allows the president to impose tariffs more quickly. But critically, TWIA and IEPA do not authorize the president to exercise some new substantive power. They're just letting him do it faster. The plaintiffs in the court assert that interpreting IEPA to authorize tariffs would, in effect, evade specific limits on tariffs and certain other tariff statutes. But as Judge Taranto explained in the Federal Circuit, Congress and IEPA understandably afford the president more flexibility to act during declared emergencies, just as Congress had done in TWIA for the wartime since 1917. Also, IEPA is not a blank check. It has its own limits. You have to have an unusual and extraordinary foreign threat. There's a default one-year limit on emergencies, enumerated list of exceptions. And you have to report to Congress. And each House of Congress has a variety of tools that can limit IEPA. Relatedly, it's also not surprising that the many ordinary tariff statutes expressly refer to tariffs, duties, and the like, while IEPA and TWA and TWIA do not. So you might say, well, why don't they reference it? If you're saying it, this is Amy Coney Barrett would say, if it's really trying to do that, why wouldn't they just say tariffs? If they really wanted to give you the power to handle tariffs, why not say it? As Judge Taranto astutely explained, Congress in those statutes was overwhelmingly focused on the tariff issues, whereas Congress in IEPA and TWIA was focused on the subject of emergencies and giving broad powers. So that's why they're not limiting it by saying tariffs, because then what if he didn't want to use tariffs? He wanted to use something else. So they wanted to give him broader powers. When they say regulate importation, IEPA embodies an eyes-open congressional grant of broad emergency authority. That's why they use this language. You want them to use a more limiting language of something specific tool at his disposal. It's one of many tools at his disposal. Finally, all that text history and precedent is further reinforced by two compelling pieces of context. First, IEPA, interpreting IEPA to exclude tariffs creates nonsensical, textual, and practical anomalies. Plaintiffs' courts do not dispute that a president can act and declare emergencies under IEPA to impose quotas or even total embargoes on all imports from a given country. But the president supposedly cannot take the far more modest step of conditioning these imports on payment. Textually, however, if quotas and embargoes are a means to regulate importation, how are tariffs not a means to regulate importation? Nothing in the text supports such an illogical distinction. What essentially this court has said is, we'll let you use an atom bomb when it comes to trading, but you're not allowed to use a machine gun. Stupid. That's what they're saying. You're allowed to use an atom bomb, but oh my gosh, you pulled out a knife. How dare you do that? It does not make much sense to think that IEPA allows presidents to, in a declared emergency, to, for example, shut off all or most imports from China, but not even impose a $1 tariff on them. That doesn't seem to make any sense to anyone who's got a brain. In short, whether through prohibiting imports via embargoes or regulating the quantity of imports through quotas, Congress granted the president flexibility in declared national emergencies to take various actions with respect to imports. And there's no coherent textual or commonsensical explanation for why a rational Congress would say, we're giving you all these powers, just not tariffs. Not tariffs. We're not giving you tariffs. No, we're not giving you tariffs. We give you everything else, but not tariffs. Second, IEPA was not debated and passed in a vacuum in 1977. It was enacted around the same time the Congress significantly constrained executive power in multiple ways in the wake of Watergate and Vietnam. So they were pretty adept at, they were adroit at withholding powers from the president if they were so inclined. And they didn't overlook TWIA and the president's emergency authorities. Led by Senators Church and Mathias, Congress carefully studied the president's emergency authorities, including TWIA. Then in 76-77, Congress enacted a variety of legislation to tighten up the president's emergency powers, including passing a new National Emergencies Act that cabined the president's authority to declare emergencies by setting forth various procedural requirements. So they said, this is how we'll stop you from going crazy with your emergencies. But when enacting IEPA, Congress continued that same language of regulate importation, and they knew it meant included tariffs. In an ordinary statutory interpretation case, I'm confident the majority of the court would flatly reject the plaintiff's exceedingly weak statutory arguments and would hold that IEPA's authorization of the president to regulate importation includes power tariffs. So in most cases, I think this court would come to a rational conclusion that it does allow his ability to include tariffs. Ordinary statutory interpretation, you all would be agreeing with me. The court today has not claimed that the phrase regulate importation excludes tariffs. Only 3 members of the court, our three wacko lefties, make the claim that excludes tariffs. No. Chief Justice opinion part 2A2, which is joined by Gorsuch, Barrett, relies on this retarded major questions doctrine. Kavanaugh doesn't want to call it a retarded. I explained to you earlier during the show why it's retarded, but he's not going to go as far as I will on that. The major questions doctrine is an important canon of statutory interpretation that the court has applied in a number of significant cases over the last 45 years. Really? Really? They never called it that in 1980. Scalia articulated the canonical statement of major questions doctrine. He never called it that. We expect Congress to speak clearly if it wishes to sign to any agency's decisions of vast economic and political significance. Stated otherwise, in cases where the executive branch takes an action of major economic and political significance, it must point to clear congressional authorization for the power it claims. The requirement of clear congressional authorization for executive action on major economic and political significance is grounded in two overlapping and reinforcing presumptions. First is a separation of powers based on presumption against delegation. So because separation of powers, if you want to say that the president has powers that were reserved for Congress, it's got to be very express. A presumption that Congress intends to make major policy decisions itself. And two, a presumption that Congress intends to make major policy decisions itself, not leave those decisions to agencies. Well, we saw that that's crap. And Congress is incredibly lazy. As this court later recounted in West Virginia, both separation of powers and principles and a practical understanding of legislative intent make us reluctant to read an ambiguous statutory text that the delegation claimed to be lurking there. So if it's vague, that's why this is why Kavanaugh in general supports the notion of major questions doctrine. The doctrine guards against unintentional, oblique, or otherwise unlikely delegations of legislative power. I agree that this case involves an executive action of major economic and political significance, which is typically the trigger for requiring clear congressional authorization. But is it? Because is it always? See, and this is the thing. Okay. I need to pause here and explain to you because I realized something as I was reading this that is very important. He's going to explain why Roberts' application of the major questions doctrine in this case is incorrect for two alternative independent reasons. Let me explain something to you because I want to explain to you how retarded it is to apply major questions doctrine here. How retarded it is. One moment. I want you to just think about this with me for a second, okay? We're trying to figure out, does this qualify as major questions or not? And this is where I tell you that Kavanaugh is intelligent, but I'm sorry, respectfully limited to a degree. The major questions doctrine is that if there's something which is significant, has political or economic significance, a statute which the way you're interpreting it has significant political or economic, if it's got political or economic significance, now this will qualify as a major question. But this statute either gives him a power to tariff or not. You don't look at how he used the statutes. You should not be looking at that to determine, is this a major question? Let's assume we have to look at it as, is his interpretation itself a major question? Even if you believe in the major questions doctrine, which clearly Kavanaugh does, he supports it. You don't look at the actions he took. You have to look at the powers that he's asserting. Meaning, let's assume that President Trump here used the emergency power, used IEPA to drop tariffs of 1% of all cars we import from Pakistan. Something which we would anticipate would bring in revenues of $100. Instead of this broad sweeping tariffs that he used. But he says, under IEPA, we're going to apply a 1% tariff on cars from Pakistan. Nowhere else, just Pakistan. Does he have the legal authority, constitutional authority, given by relying on this statute, does he have that power or not? He either has the power and can do it, or he does not have the power and he cannot do it. Well, we're trying to understand this statute. So if you're trying to understand this statute, think about this for a second. This is why trying to look at the economic significance to all of a sudden say we're going to now change our read of this statute. So if he has a 1% tariff, someone we expect to bring in $1,000 a year, let's imagine, $1,000 a year in tariffs. Does he have the right to do this or not? So, he has the right to do it. Well, okay, so let's say instead of 1% on Pakistan, he did 2% on Pakistan. Or 10. Does it now become, it's not like once you reach a certain number, all of a sudden the statute itself changes. Either the statute authorizes the president or it does not. Either it says he can do it or it does not say he can do it. If it doesn't say he can do it, it doesn't matter how big an economic thing it is. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about $50 or we're talking about $50 trillion. It is the same thing. He either has the power or not. And any type of circumstance, if you look at it from the extreme circumstance, you could look at anything being significant economically. In theory, if he had done 1% tariffs on Pakistan and nothing else, the left could have come in and said this. They would have said, well, we know he did 1% on tariffs, but what if he had done an 80% tariff on the entire world? That would obviously make it something that's, would Congress really be okay with that? See, you can't look at the actual numbers of this particular thing. This is why the entire major questions doctrine and saying if it's economically significant, now we're going to say that this is something that we're going to read against him having that power. It's such a ridiculous thing because the statute is either good or it's not good. It's either empowering or it's not empowering. And it's not empowering him to do $10, but not it's not. You cannot read the same statute to say it's empowering him to do $10 in tariffs, but not $10 trillion in tariffs. It either gives him the power for $10 trillion, or it gives him nothing. And that's why trying to say that, well, because this is a massive thing of economic repercussions in the way that Trump is using it, now all of a sudden this tariff, which we're going to read this as not a power that they're giving to him. Why? When they wrote the damn statute, they had in mind either it's empowering the president or it's not. And if it's empowering him for $10 trillion. And if it's not empowering him, it's not empowering him to get $10. And that's why trying to turn your interpretation of a statute based on the economic impact is ridiculous. There's no logical basis to come to this conclusion. It's manufactured theory. I hope that was clear. Was that clear? Did you guys understand what I was getting at there? They're looking at how Trump applied it and said, because now this is a economically significant thing, that means now we can weigh in on it. Well, if you had 5 different presidents who used it in economic insignificant ways, and you were looking at it and say, was this a major question thing? You'd be like, well, look at this. You're talking about $20. How's that significant? That's not a major question. Now, those plaintiffs there fighting against the president in those circumstances would say, well, he's doing a small amount, but what if it's a really big amount? Well, if you're going to say the hypothetical, what if it's a really big amount, you can say that in any circumstance to basically say that every question is a major question. So it's like there's no common sense here in this court. What's wrong with these people? That's what I'm saying. Even this guy, I'm agreeing with Kavanaugh here. He's saying, I agree this case involves an executive action of major economic and political significance. Why? Why? That's why the whole major questions doctrine is bizarrely stupid. You're going to change how we read a statute based on how a particular president decides to use that statute? Ridiculous. So that means that, so if you use it on a small basis, that means Congress meant to give him that power. But if he used it on a big basis, then Congress didn't mean to give him that power. What a ridiculous theory this is. First, the statutory text history. I'm getting angry at him even. Statutory text history and precedent constitute clear congressional authorization. Second, an alternative, the major question doctrine is not applied in the foreign affairs context. So this is an interesting thing that he's saying here, which is like when it comes to foreign affairs, courts recognize Congress gives really flexible discretion to the president to go after American interests. In that context, we should. He's basically saying, I don't want to have major questions when it comes to foreign affairs, because that's his domain. Because the major questions doctrine demands clear congressional authorization, the court has repeatedly recognized that doctrine is distinct from routine statutory interpretation. It's a made-up thing. It's a completely invented thing. Importantly, therefore, the doctrine applies and makes a meaningful difference only in cases where the executive reading of a statute would, under more ordinary circumstances, be upheld. To properly set up the inquiry, a major questions issue arises when the executive relies on the text of a generally worded statute to exercise a specific power of major economic and political significance. The generally worded statute does not explicitly mention the specific major power, but the asserted major power falls within the generally worded text of the statute, such that the executive's assertion of the power would, under more ordinary circumstances, be upheld. The question then is whether the generally worded statute supplies clear congressional authorization for the president to go do what he wants to do. Here, for example, does the generally worded statute, which says regulate importation, clearly authorize the president to impose tariffs? The requirement of clear congressional authorization is easy enough to state, but how do we apply it? So now, even then you say, like, what makes something clear? How do we decide in a particular case whether a generally worded statute actually constitutes clear congressional authorization for a major power? For starters, and critically, the court has repeatedly emphasized the major questions doctrine is not a magic words requirement. It clearly, well, of course it is a magic words requirement. In other words, doctrine is not requiring explicit reference to specific major power itself. As the court cases amply demonstrate, the major questions doctrine does not force Congress to delegate in highly specific terms. Of course it does. Such a made-up concept. Rather than require magic words, the court's cases have focused on 4 somewhat overlapping factors or considerations in order to assess whether a generally worded statute constitutes clear congressional authorization for the specific major power. This is such a power grab by the court. It's like, if we want to read something as a major question, we're going to read it that way. If we want to say this is clear, we're going to say it's clear. If we want to say it's not clear, we're going to say it's not clear. This is the stupidest thing in the world. So aggravating. The major questions doctrine most prominent work has been to ensure that the executive cannot suddenly seize an old and generally worded statute to exercise a power of great economic and political significance when that power would not reasonably have been understood at the time of enactment. And his point is this was reasonably understood at the time of enactment. So it precludes an agency's attempt to effectuate a fundamental revision of a statute. Stated otherwise, an agency's attempt to employ an old statute focused on one problem to solve a new and different problem may be a warning that's that sign that is acting without clear congressional authority. So, prototypical example was OSHA when they had their nationwide COVID-19 vaccine mandate. It was relied on a statutory provision that came 40 years before the pandemic, and it was focused on conditions specific to the workplace. Another example arose when, so they basically said, oh, because we have to have workplace safety, so we're going to reapply workplace safety to say you have to get vaxxed. Another example was when the EPA invoked newfound authority to regulate emissions from millions of small sources, including retail stores, offices, apartment buildings, shopping centers. We saw the CDC trying to impose eviction moratorium for rental housing through an unprecedented assertion of its authority to regulate public health. We can regulate public health so you can't kick out tenants. Courts examine the agency's past interpretations of relevant statutes. The executives, that's just ordinary. Executive track record can be particularly probative in the major questions context. A contemporaneous and long-held executive branch interpretation of a statute is entitled some weight. Okay. The NFIB court therefore found it critical that OSHA in its half-century existence had never before adopted a broad public health regulation of this kind under the statute, and the agency sought to invoke its authority for the vaccine mandate. And he clarifies how similarly was reinventing their powers with using old statutes and rereading them in new and inventive ways. All these cases involve some serious mismatches between the agency's usual regulatory activities and its asserted major power. All of a sudden, you want to come up with some new power you have. You don't need a major questions doctrine. You could just say this is retarded. No one ever understood it to mean what you thought it means. Fourth, the court looks at whether the relevant statutory language is used to justify the executive's exercise of a major power is oblique, elliptical, or cryptic. Congress does not hide elephants in statutory mouse holes. That's a nice phrase. Congress does not hide elephants in statutory mouse holes. In MCI telecommunications, for example, the court refused to allow the FCC to eliminate rate regulation and fundamentally overhaul telecommunications based on a subtle provision that merely permitted the FCC to modify rate filing requirements. So something that's so sweeping is not just like vaguely referenced. So in this case, we must apply those four factors in order to determine whether Congress, when it said regulate importation under IEEPA, clearly authorized the president to impose tariffs. As I see it, those factors show that Congress clearly authorized tariffs in IEEPA when it said you can regulate importation. First, unlike OSHA, or the gas regulation utility air, he's not exercising an unheralded or newfound authority based on a long extant statute. Long extant means it's been here for ages, and all of a sudden you come up with some brand new way to do something in a way that was unanticipated by Congress. But as we explained above, tariff authority exercise here is not remotely unheralded. To recap, and it goes through all the different examples of when presidents had been wielding this power. So yeah, that was obviously not brand new. He's a little wordy. Second, the president is not interpreting the regulate importation language in IEEPA differently from how past presidents have interpreted. At least as far as briefing and arguments in this case have disclosed, no presidential administration since the enactment of regulate importation language in TWIA has interpreted the statute to exclude the power to impose tariffs. We've never seen anyone say it doesn't include tariffs. The current president's reading of IEEPA follows from it and is entirely consistent with those past interpretations, making his position nothing like when the FDA, when it changed its long-standing position that it lacked the authority to regulate cigarettes. Or OSHA with their vax mandates. What we have here is established practice. And the executive's track record is consistent with what we're seeing happen today. Third, there's no mismatch. Power tariff falls squarely within his wheelhouse. So that's another thing, which is it's logical for him to do this, as opposed to the CDC all of a sudden addressing rental issues. Fourth, the president is not relying on oblique, elliptical, or cryptic language. He's got very clear language here, which has been used this way countless times before to include taxes, tariffs. All that makes this case dramatically different from, and really the opposite of the major question cases where the court has ruled against the government. The text, history, context, precedent all point strongly to the conclusion that as in 1977, tariffs were a well-recognized means of regulating importation like quotas and embargoes. As Judge Taranto persuasively summarized, this case bears none of the hallmarks of past major question cases where the court found a lack of clear congressional authorization. This court's recent decision in Biden v. Missouri strongly supports the president's position here. That case involved a challenge to President Biden's COVID-19 vax requirement for millions of healthcare workers. Executive action there was undoubtedly major. The court upheld the government's vaccine mandate based on a general statutory authorization for HHS to impose safety requirements for healthcare facilities, notwithstanding the lack of explicit statutory references to vaccines. That was a terrible decision. In doing so, the court emphasized that state vaccination requirements were common for healthcare workers and that federal government regulatory required healthcare workers take various safety precautions. All the knuckleheads on the left jumped all over that. They were all in favor of that one. Where's your major question then? Notably, the court upheld the vaccine mandate even though the federal government had not traditionally imposed such vaccine requirements on healthcare workers. The clarity of the congressional authorization in today's case is far stronger than Biden v. Missouri. This is just exposing how these justices all have a preconception and just find ways to backfill in how to support their preconceptions. Getting very, very sour on the court as I'm reading this. Of course, the court upheld the executive exercise of major power in Biden v. Missouri. It follows that the court today should likewise uphold the president's assertion of a major power here, like cases should be treated alike. So what does Chief Justice rely on? Its primary argument in this case that the statute must use the word tariff or duty or tax or the like to authorize tariffs on foreign imports. But this court has repeatedly emphasized that the major questions doctrine is not a magic words requirement. So why are you coming up with a magic words requirement today, Chief Justice? Oh, because that's the position you want to take. In Algonquin, the court unanimously and squarely rejected the same argument that the statutory provision must specifically mention tariffs or duties or taxes for the president to impose tariffs on foreign imports. So I guess Chief Justice thinks that Nixon and Ford tariffs we got all that wrong. The court got all that wrong. So too might other tariffs imposed on the longstanding Section 232 tariff statute. Chief Justice's opinion approach opinions approach on the major questions doctrine is a magic words test under another name in contravention of our precedents that make clear that Congress need not use magic words are highly specific. This is another reason why we should never be using the major question, because it becomes a magic words test. You say it's not a magic words test, but clearly it can be. Another huge flaw in the major question doctrine. Well, I'm going to say it's not a magic word test, but sometimes. So aggravating. I'm sorry. I feel like I've been reading like in just bit in like rage. I've been rage reading here. I'm really rage reading at this point. Should I stop? Should I keep going? In previous cases, the court has looked at 4 factors to determine whether there's a clear congressional authorization, precisely because the major question canon has no magic words requirements. Yeah, well, you should abandon it now, recognizing that was all BS. In sum, under the major question doctrine, as the court has applied, this should be a straightforward case, and it should win on the major question doctrine. Second, there's an alternative and independent reason why the major question doctrine does not apply here. This is a foreign affairs case. We know that the executive has the power to act in foreign affairs. And that's really what his primary function is. Yet this court has never before applied the major question doctrine or anything resembling it to a foreign affairs statute. I would not make this case the first. Well, obviously you wouldn't. You gave other reasons you didn't like it. Rather, in the foreign affairs context, this court has interpreted statutes as written with respect to the primacy of Congress and the president's roles in foreign affairs without using major questions doctrines. Now you're bringing major questions doctrine to a brand new area. Look at the Frankenstein you helped create, Kavanaugh. You were all for the major questions doctrine when it was administrative agencies. Now it's applying in foreign affairs. Now it is becoming a magic words test. Major questions doctrine has basically become a Frankenstein, which has outgrown its creators. Stupid. Deeply rooted textualist approach to interpreting foreign affairs statutes is nothing new. What is new and rather extraordinary is the approach embodying the Chief Justice's opinion for 3 justices, which would extend the major question doctrine into foreign affairs realm for the first time. Recall that the major question doctrine is based on 2 overlapping foundations. You have separation of powers and a practical understanding of legislative intent. So separation of powers, the major question doctrine serves to reinforce the non-delegation doctrine. But in the foreign affairs realm, the court has recognized that Congress often broadly delegates authority to the executive. So since they're giving broad authority to the executive in foreign affairs, why are you now limiting it, reading in a limited way? From the founding, numerous foreign affairs statutes authorizing action by the president with respect to subjects affecting foreign relations either leave the exercise of power to his unrestricted judgment or provide a standard for far more general than that which has always been considered a requisite with regard to domestic affairs. Meaning, when it comes to domestic affairs, we're much more limiting on his power. Foreign affairs, he is the captain of the ship without peer. The reason for those broad delegations is simple and obvious. If success for America's foreign affairs aims is to be achieved, congressional legislation must often accord the president a degree of discretion and freedom from statutory restriction, which would not be admissible were domestic affairs alone involved. You want it to be successful, you want it to be a failure. Stupid. As Justice Robert Jackson summarized, the court's non-delegation case is consistent with the unbroken legislative practice which have prevailed almost from the inception of our national government, meaning almost 250 years now, have recognized internal and external affairs as being separate categories, and how that strict limitation on congressional delegation of power to the president over internal affairs, that even when they limit him on internal affairs, that doesn't apply on foreign affairs. As Justice Jackson further noted, there's the unwisdom of requiring Congress in this field of government power to lay down narrowly definite standards by which the president is to be governed. It's ridiculous. Stupid. The major questions doctrine is designed in part to protect non-delegation principles, but the non-delegation doctrine doesn't play a role in foreign affairs. Then how are you using a major questions doctrine to put a thumb on the scale against the president when it comes to foreign affairs? Doesn't make sense. Relatedly, to the extent that the major questions doctrine is designed to reflect a practical understanding of legislative intent, the doctrine appropriately plays no role in national security or foreign policy context because the canon does not reflect ordinary congressional intent in those areas. Congress ordinarily seeks to give the president substantial authority and flexibility to protect America. That's the way things should be working. But major questions doctrine, for a variety of reasons, have less purchase in the foreign affairs area. So Congress can decide to write things broadly and more narrowly, but we shouldn't be reading it and drafting it against the president when it comes to foreign affairs. And that's why this court has never before superimposed the major questions doctrine on any sort of thing that would place a thumb on the scale against the president in foreign affairs. Tariffs case plainly falls into foreign affairs. Tariffs on foreign imports are significant tools of foreign policy and national security, whether imposed under IEEPA. They're often used to advance foreign policy goals, and this president certainly has been using it that way. When it comes to foreign trade specifically, Congress often invests the president with large discretion in matters arising out of execution of statutes relating to trade. Congress wants him to have broad powers there. That's why they use such broad language like regulate importation. As Professors Bradley and Goldsmith well summarized, there's a settled practice of about a century of executive branch exercising emergency powers in many important contexts pursuant to the broadly worded IEEPA and its predecessor, TWIA. There's even longer practice dating to the founding of presidents exercising trade-related sanctions authority pursuant to broadly worded statutes. As with tariffs on foreign imports, historically, IEEPA tariffs on foreign imports at issue in this case implicate foreign affairs. Moreover, consistent with history and traditional use of tariffs, presidents exercise IEEPA authority in connection with highly sensitive negotiations. All right. So. I don't understand his logic here where he's saying in Algonquin they ignore major question doctrine. There was no major question doctrine then, so I'm not sure what he's trying to say here. But his point is the presidents have long been granted substantial discretion over tariffs, and this court has never before applied the major questions doctrine to a statute authorizing the president. Okay. Well, like I said, the major questions doctrine is a brand new baby that was conceived primarily by this court. Chief Justice opinion's reliance on the major questions doctrine in this foreign affair case is a novel and unprecedented use of our major questions doctrine to invalidate presidential action. Why? Because it's action taken by Trump. That's why. Related precedent further demonstrates that the major questions doctrine is not traditionally applied in the national security or foreign policy context. The only reason I'm not furious about this is because Trump is going to basically circle around this whole stupid decision. So he's trying to just nail home why it shouldn't apply in national security or foreign policy contexts. So where the president was given in in the Hamdi case, all necessary and appropriate force against those nations, organizations, persons he determines planned, authorized, committed, or aid terrorist attacks on September 11th. So, in the Hamdi, the government militarily detained in the United States American citizens who had taken up arms with the Taliban. The plaintiff, Hamdi, argued, among other things, that the AUMF generally authorized the use of force, but did not specifically authorize military detention, at least detention of American citizen enemy combatants in the United States. He contended that his military detention was therefore illegal. In the principal opinion by Justice O'Connor, the court rejected Hamdi's statutory argument, explaining that it was of no moment that the AUMF does not use specific language of detention. Rather, because detention is to prevent combatants' returns to the battlefield is a fundamental incident of waging war and permitting the use of necessary and appropriate force, Congress has clearly and unmistakably authorized detention. Considering the similarities between Hamdi and this case, both involve major questions of foreign affairs, and Hamdi involved U.S. military detention of American citizen in America, so basic civil liberties. The case involves tariffs on pursuant to generally worded authorization for use of military force. This case involves tariffs on foreign goods imported to America pursuant to generally worded authorizations to regulate importation. Okay. Here is a matter of history, practice, and precedent. IEEPA's general authorization for regulation of importation likely clearly encompasses tariffs on foreign imports. Second, 1981, Dames and Moore. Court did not apply major question doctrine, even though the court had recently applied that principle in significant domestic policy. So we see it was avoided there when we were talking about dealing with the Iran hostage crisis. So, even though they could have applied major questions doctrine because it was foreign affairs, he's saying they did not. And he's saying, so you guys are basically going into you're charting a new course for major questions doctrine where it's going into foreign affairs when the Supreme Court has never wanted to do that before. Having said all that on foreign affairs, I reiterate the major question doctrine, even if it applies in foreign affairs, does not defeat major executive actions that are clearly authorized by Congress. As he says over and over again, this is clearly authorized. Finally, no member of court today relies on the non-delegation doctrine, but the plaintiffs briefly raised such an argument, and I will therefore briefly address it. The argument is unavailing for many reasons. This court has repeatedly rejected constitutional challenges to congressional delegations of the president in the foreign affairs area, including delegations of tariff authority. For matters of foreign affairs and national security, the court has traditionally recognized that Congress must, of necessity, paint with a brush broader than that it customarily wields in domestic areas. To reiterate, numerous statutes authorizing action of the president leave the exercise of his power to unrestrained judgment. So he's able to make his own call here, or provide a standard far more general than that which has always been considered requisite. Justice Robert Jackson likewise noted the unwisdom of requiring Congress in this field to give narrow definitions. Because statutes that involve the external relations of the United States do not trigger the same kind of delegation concerns as purely domestic ones, the court has regularly upheld delegations of power to the president in national security and foreign policy realms. And as tariffs in particular, broad delegations of tariff authority to the president have been in the heartland of delegations, as he brought up 50 pages ago. And he reviews Algonquin again when they stood behind tariffs. It's also useful to underscore the extraordinary nature of the plaintiff's non-delegation argument here. Plaintiff's submission would mean that those tariffs would be unlawful, even if IEEPA explicitly authorized tariffs. That argument that they cannot delegate, which is a crazy argument. Unlike their statutory and major questions doctrine arguments, their non-delegation argument is not based on a lack of an explicit reference to tariffs and duties alike. Their non-delegation argument instead goes much further, require very specific congressional directions to the president on when and under what circumstances he can impose tariffs and how high those tariffs can be. Retarded. Saying, oh, unless they tell you you can have tariffs, and this is how high, and this is the circumstance, and it has to be like this, you can't, then it's not good. You have no power to do it. Ridiculous. It would have dramatic consequences, likely wipe out many existing tariff statutes that have long been upheld by the court as well as TWIA. So it's kind of a ridiculous perspective. The plaintiff's non-delegation theory would threaten various other national security and foreign affairs statutes, and basically only a complete jackass would actually try and make the argument, as in the 3 liberal justices. The overarching theme of the court's opinion is that tariffs are not a clear means to regulate importation, and Congress is therefore required to use the word tariff if they wanted the president to have that ability. To summarize, Algonquin in 76 unanimously held the opposite. Nixon and Ford tariffs are based on statutory provisions that do not use the word tariff or duty. If anything, they use more narrow language. All of that and much more, in my view, overwhelmingly establishes IEEPA clearly authorizes the president to impose tariffs. That said, with respect to tariffs in particular, the court's decision might not prevent presidents from imposing most, if not all, these same sorts of tariffs under other statutory authorities. For example, you can go to Section 122 of the Trade Act, impose a temporary import surcharge to deal with large and serious United States balance of payment deficits. Go that way. There's a lot of ways it can go. Trump is right. They're basically telling him how to basically circumvent this stupid decision. The president may take appropriate and feasible action, including imposing a duty, if he determines that an act, policy, or practice of a foreign law is unjustifiable and burdens or restricts the United States commerce. Section 338 of the Tariff Act of 1930 permits the president to impose tariffs when he finds that any foreign country places any burden or disadvantage upon the commerce of the United States. So he can go to China and say, hey, look, you got your slave practice there. We're not dealing with you. I'm hitting you with an 80% tariff, 150% tariff. So the court's decision is not likely to greatly restrict president's tariff authority going forward. Look at this. He's telling him, he's like, Trump's going to basically do an end run on you and make you look like knuckleheads. That's what's going to happen. But the court's decision is likely to generate other serious practical consequences in the near term. One issue will be refunds. Refunds of billions of dollars would have significant consequences on the U.S. Treasury. The court says nothing about whether, and if so, how the government should go about returning the billions of dollars that is collected from importers. But that process is likely to be a mess, as well as acknowledged in the oral argument. Second issue, decision effects on the current trade deals. What's going to happen with that? Because we have facilitated trade deals worth trillions of dollars, including foreign nations from China to UK to Japan. Court's decision should generate uncertainty regarding various trade agreements. Basically, you're screwing up the markets and our trade deals. The tariffs at issue here may or may not be wise policy, but as a matter of text, history, and precedent, they are clearly lawful. I respectfully dissent. So I like some of what he said there, not everything. It's not quite as great as some people were telling me it was, but it's pretty good. It's a little repetitive and redundant and repetitious and redundancy. But otherwise, it was really good. It was very good. And I also don't like that he stands behind the major questions doctrine, which I basically pointed out is just ridiculous and stupid. And that's what I got for you tonight, my folks. I thank you for joining me. God willing, tomorrow evening, we'll be starting early State of the Union address. Starting tomorrow evening. I will see you all then. Is there anywhere I should redirect you? Should I redirect you? Let me see if there's anywhere for me to send you. I'm not seeing any. I'm not seeing anyone. Nope. All right. You're just going to have to wander around aimlessly. What can I tell you? I wish I could help. I wish I could help. All right, my friends. I thank you all for joining me. Tomorrow evening, we're going to start at least by 9, the latest, maybe even earlier. We'll see. Maybe even earlier. Till then, I thank you all for joining me. I'll remind you, lab meat was never meant for you. It was meant for they, them. Don't touch the lab meat. Lab meat never meant for you. Don't eat the lab meat. Lab meat is never meant for you. And do not eat bugs. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. I thank you. Have a good night. Godspeed.